in attendance. However, some Board of Commissioners and staff are attending virtually, and arrangements have been made to allow the virtual participation as well. In addition to participation, I suggest that due to the circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic, that you make the following changes to your zoning meeting rules for July 21st Board of Commissioners meeting 1. Citizens be allowed to participate in the meeting virtually. The BSC members can vote by voice or hand signature. Applicants and those opposed to the applications remain at 10 minutes for each side. If an opposition presents for longer than 10 minutes, the equivalent time of minutes over that to the original 10 minutes will be provided to the applicant. Persons wishing to be counted as either in favor or in opposition to the application will be recognized. Persons who wish to speak virtually in favor or in opposition to an application will identify themselves accordingly to IS technical staff for participation during the presentation. The person speaking virtually will acknowledge and affirm that his or her testimony before the BOC is under oath and affirmed to be truthful. I would ask that be placed in form of a motion and made part of our rules for this meeting, Chairman.
So moved. So do I have a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. Passes 5-0. All right, thank you very much, Board. I appreciate that. And thank you, Mr. Rowan.
Chair, if I may, just for clarity, I think there's a sense from the Board to go ahead and do this for August as well. Can we go ahead and do it for the August meeting so we don't have the clarity regarding how the August meeting will be operated? And then at that meeting, you can decide what you would need to do for later in September.
So you want to read the statement now and also propose the same revision for the August meeting and have the Board vote on it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
It would be the same statement, just that same motion would also be for the August meeting, sir.
All right, so you want us to do that now, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Make the
You
motion.
want me to make the motion? Okay, all right. I so moved to make the same revision and modification to the meeting for virtual to apply to the August meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a discussion. All in favor, please raise your hand. And it passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, I have to loosen my tie, Commissioner Ott. That's why I didn't hear the motion correctly last time. Just want you to know that. All right, with that, let's get into the meeting here. And John, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing will be conducted with in-person and virtual participation. We would ask that the vote
Close.
procedure. As these cases presented, we will recognize those on-site and virtual in support or oppose to a specific case. For virtual attendees, to support or oppose a case, indicate if you wish to speak concerning a case in your Q&A box on your computer or portable device. For instance, to support a case, type in the following: SUP and then the case number, Z123. Or if you want to support it and also speak, you would want to type into your Q&A box, SUP Z123 speak. To oppose a zoning case, you would want to type in the following command: OPP Z123. If you also want to speak in opposition to a case, you would type in OPP case number Z123 and then speak. For the speakers watching online today, we would ask you will be called by name. Your line will be unmuted when it's your turn to speak. You will say your name, where you live, and you will also affirm that you have been sworn in to present testimony to the Board of Commissioners. For the hearing procedures today, we're going to follow the following process and procedure. Each case will be called in numerical order. These cases called, we would ask the applicant to stand and raise their hand to show that they are in attendance. Then we're going to call to see if anyone here is opposed to the case in person. And we would ask the people here today in person also stand and raise their hands so they can be counted for the record. After recognizing the applicant and the opposition, the applicant and the opposition will be asked to come forward to the front to be sworn in so they can present testimony to the Board of Commissioners. The applicant will testify first, and then the opposition, if any, will testify second. It's important to note that each side only gets 10 minutes to state their case or concerns. There's not a process to rebut what someone else has said, and there's not a process to reserve your time to convey all your information to the board within your 10-minute time frame. Additionally, if more than one person wants to speak on a case, you may want to coordinate each other about what you're going to talk about, because each side only gets 10 minutes, and you don't want to cover the same information twice. Then after the 10-minute presentation period, the board will start discussing the case at hand. For the discussion, they may ask one more speaker to come back to the front or virtually to answer questions or make more comments. And after that, the board will make a decision to either approve, deny, hold, or continue the case at hand. Mr. Chairman, board, there are a number of cases on today's agenda which have been withdrawn and not be heard today. First case is rezoning case D28 of 2020, Trading LLC. This case has been withdrawn without prejudice and will not be heard today. LUP 9 of 2020, Megan Foos. This case has been withdrawn without prejudice and will not be heard today. Other business item number 30 of 2020, the Home Depot Incorporated. This case has been withdrawn and will not be heard today. Mr. Chairman, board, there is one case on today's agenda which was going to be heard. The applicant is asking that this case be withdrawn without prejudice. That's SLUP 4 of 2019, A1 Auto Force LLC. The applicant would like to withdraw this case, Mr. Chairman of board, and we would need to have a board vote to withdraw without prejudice.
That was SLUP 4 or 7?
That's 4 of 2019.
That's my case, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Burwell?
I make a motion to allow the applicant to withdraw SLUP 4 without prejudice.
Okay, we have a second? I have a second. Commissioner Ott, thank you. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, raise your hand. All in favor, please raise your hand. And it passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of board. There are a number of cases on today's printed agenda which have been continued or held and will not be heard today. First case is rezoning case D62 of 2019, Embry Development LLC. This case was continued until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So the D62 2019 will not be heard today. Rezoning case D76 of 2019. The August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z76 of 2019 will not be heard today. SLUP 17 of 2019, St. Benedict Physical Day School Incorporated. Case was continued by the Planning Commission and will not be heard until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So SLUP 17 of 2019 will not be heard today. Zoning case Z13 of 2020, Arturo Martinez. Case was continued until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z13 of 2020 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z29 of 2020, Seoul Southeast LP Company Incorporated. This case was held by the Planning Commission until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z29 of 2020 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z33 of 2020, Florida Development Group LLC. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z33 of 2020 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z36 of 2020, Greenhouse Properties of Atlanta LLC. This case was continued by the staff until the August 18th, 2020 Board of Commissioners zoning hearing. So Z36 of 2020 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z37 of 2020, Site Centers Corp. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z37 of 2020 will not be heard today. Zoning case Z38 of 2020, St. Benedict Episcopal Day School. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z38 of 2020 will not be heard today. Zoning case Z39 of 2020, Cable Management Incorporated. This case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z39 of 2020 will not be heard today. LUP 12 of 2020, Jeffrey C. Smith. This Case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So LEP 12 of 2020 will not be heard today. SLEP 4 of 2020, White Oak Longline Holdings LLC. This case was continued by the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So SLEP 4 of 2020 will not be heard today. SLEP 6 of 2020, St. Benedict's Episcopal School. Case was continued by the staff until the August 4th, 2020 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So SLEP 6 of 2020 will not be heard today. Other business number 38 of 2020, Jupiter Development Incorporated. This case was continued by the staff to the August 18th, 2020 Board of Commissioners zoning hearing. So other business number 38 of 2020 will not be heard today. Mr. Chairman of the Board, there are a number of cases on today's agenda which would have been heard. The applicants are asking for some continuances on these cases, and I'm going to read these into the record one by one, and the board would need to vote on these one by one.
Okay.
D7 of 2020, Seven Springs Development Company Incorporated. This is continued, Mr. Chairman of the Board, so the staff would ask the board to continue D7.
Z7 is the one you said what you want to continue it?
Yes, that case needs to be continued. D7 of 2020 until your August 8th zoning hearing date.
Okay, so that's Commissioner Cupid.
Yes, so moved.
And I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Next case is rezoning case D30 2020, Ralph S. L. Mausery. This case, the applicant would like to continue it, Mr. Chairman of the board, to continue working on the plans. So the staff would ask the board to continue rezoning case D30 2020 to your August 18th zoning hearing date.
Commissioner Cupid?
So moved.
I'll second it. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. Passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next case is SLEP 7 of 2020 with Quick Creek Companies LLC. The staff would ask the board to continue this until your August 18th hearing date so they can repost the sign, Mr. Chairman of the board.
I'm sorry, John. I didn't hear you on that. What was that request?
That was SLEP 7 of 2020.
Okay. That's Commissioner Burrell?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay.
It's SLEP 7 motion to continue to the August.
Okay, I'll second it. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Other business case number 29 of 2020, Pedro Santana. The staff would ask the board to continue this case until your August 18th zoning hearing date.
Commissioner Gambrell.
So moved.
Okay, I'll second it. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Business item number 36 of 2020.
Okay.
Rob Patty, staff would ask the board to continue this case until your August 18th, 2020 zoning hearing date.
I was OB 36.
Yes, sir.
That's me.
Commissioner Burrell.
Motion to continue OB 36 to the August meeting.
Okay, I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. Passes 5-0. Thank you.
And the last case I have on my agenda is other business item number 39, 2020 Macklin Village LLC. The staff would ask the board to continue this case to your August 18th zoning hearing date.
Okay, Commissioner Cupid.
So moved.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. And passes 5-0. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for John.
Yes.
John, you read that LUP 13 was being continued, but I see it on the consent agenda. Is that continued or on consent?
That was LUP 12 that was continued.
Okay, because the slide that was put up was 13.
Okay, it was LUP 12 of 2020. Let me correct that. Jeffrey Smith is being continued to your August 18th.
Okay, so LUP 13 is still on consent.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so now we go to the consent agenda, John.
I just have two more announcements here. I would like to ask people in today's audience, if you are here in person, if you have a cell phone, please turn the ringer off on your cell phone, as the ringing doesn't interfere with the broadcast presentation. For the Board of Commissioners, must file a campaign contribution disclosure statement. If within 2 years immediately preceding filing of a rezoning application, a campaign contribution totaling $250 more is made to a current member of the Board of Commissioners. Additional information about this requirement is located in the zoning hearing room in the back corner. And I want to remind applicants for any interested party that information is due to this board the Wednesday prior to this hearing date. Any information submitted to this board after the Wednesday due date may or may not be considered by the board at their discretion. Next, Chairman, I'm ready to start the consent agenda.
Go ahead, John.
Cobb County Board of Commissioners zoning hearing consent agenda for July 21st, 2020. First case on consent is LUP 13 of 2020. Scott and Haley Waller, FELIX Farms, request a temporary land use permit renewal for the purpose of produce and flower sales in land lot 532 of the 17th district. The property is located on the south side of Cooper Lake Road, east of Mayville Road. The Planning Commission recommends approval of LUP 13 for 24 months, subject to the following conditions. Number one, site plan received by the Zoning Division on May 8, 2020. The District Commissioner approved a minor modification. Number two, no retail or wholesale customers at the property. Number three, Department of Transportation comments and recommendations. Is there anyone virtually opposed to LUP 13? No? Okay. And the applicant is on property if the board needs to see it. Is there anyone here in person opposing LUP 13? We did not have anyone this morning opposing LUP 13. Moving on to the consent agenda cases. On consent agenda, the business number 31 of 2020 is consider a reduction of minimum public road frontage for VIVIANA ARBOLEDA FLOREZ from 75 feet to 50 feet for parcel 2 for property located at the eastern terminus of Juliet Lane in land lot 150 of the 17th district. Staff recommends approval, subject to stormwater management comments, Cobb DOT comments, and fire department comments. The applicant is on property, and there was no one here online or in person to oppose this when we took roll at 9 o'clock. The business item number 34 of 2020 is to consider a site plan amendment for IBT Sandy Plain Center, Marietta, LLC, regarding rezoning application Z23 of 2010 for property located on the south side of Charlotte Road, the west side of Sandy Plains Road, and on the east side of Gordy Parkway, and land lots 385, 386, and 407 of the 16th district. Staff recommends approval, subject to the following conditions. Number one, site plan received June 9, 2020, with the district commissioner approved a minor modification. Number two, stormwater management comments. And number three, all previous stipulations not in conflict with this amendment to remain in effect. The applicant is present, and we did take roll this morning at 9 o'clock, and there is no one here virtually or in person to oppose this case. Other business item number 35 of 2020 is to consider a site plan approval for Jamie Ram regarding rezoning application D170 of 2005, property located on the south side of Shiloh Manor Drive, east of Shiloh Manor Court, in land lot 796 of the 16th district. Staff recommends approval, subject to the following conditions. Number one, site plan contained in the other business packet with the remain in effect. And we did take a roll call before 9 o'clock, and there was no one here in person or virtually to oppose other business item 35. Other business item number 36 of 2020 is to consider a site plan approval for Rob, that one was continued, so we're not going to hear OB 36. OB 37 of 2020 is to consider a stipulation amendment for Alan GREER regarding rezoning application D104 of 2006 for property located on the northeast side of Cobb Parkway and on the southwest side of Old 41 Highway and land lot 175 of the 20th district. Staff recommends approval, subject to the following conditions. Number one, auto body paint and body shop is a permitted use. Number two, all work to be done inside the building. Number three, no outdoor storage of any kind, including auto body parts. Number four, all vehicles on site to be parked and striped parking spaces that meet county standards. And number 5, all previous stipulations not in conflict with this amendment to remain in effect. We did take roll before 9 o'clock, and there was no one here opposed virtually or online or in person. Yes. Are they still online? Okay. OB 37, Mr. Chairman Board, we did get someone call in, so we're checking on that one. So we're going to put OB 37 on hold right now. And that one will not be part of your consent agenda.
Well, just continue to read through it, and if he comes on before you finish reading the consent agenda, we can bring him on. If not, we may have to move it to regular to hear his comments, okay?
Okay, and there's no one online, so we can leave that one on consent, Chairman Board.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure that if somebody's there that wants to talk about it, go by the rules here, okay?
Yes. And last case is other business item number 40 of 2020, which is to consider a site plan approval and stipulation amendment for Pokemon Enterprises Incorporated regarding rezoning application number 423 of 1983 and C54 of 1994 for property located on the west side of Chattanooga Parkway and on the south side of Chattanooga Road in landmark 605, 427, and 428 of the 16th district. Staff recommends approval, subject to number 1, the site plan contained in the other business packet. District Commission consider minor modifications. Number 2, asphalt shingles are not required. And number 3, all previous stipulations on conflict with this amendment remain in effect. The applicant is present, and there is no one here in person or virtually to oppose this case. And that would complete your consent agenda, Mr. Chairman Board.
Excuse me, Chairman, I would like to add another item to consent.
Sure. Go ahead, Commissioner Cuban.
I'd like to add other business item 33 to consent with District Commissioner approving final building architecture.
Okay, I'll second that motion. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. And 1 second, Commissioner. Okay, Commissioner Gelly, Commissioner Campbell, did you support that motion? I just can't see your picture. Commissioner Gamble, are you on?
I did, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
I support it. Yeah.
Passes 5-0.
Okay.
All right. So, which number was that again, Commissioner Cupid?
33.
OB 33.
3.
Gotcha. All right. Before I call the motion, Commissioner Gamble, are you okay with OB 37 remain on consent? I was a little confused here about whether or not somebody was going to have a comment or not.
It is my understanding, Chairman, that Mr. Peterson stated that the person they thought was on the phone was not in opposition. Is that correct?
They are not in opposition.
Okay, all right, we're good. Okay. Thank you. With that, I'll call a motion, I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as revised. We have a second? We have a second, Commissioner Ryan. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. And it passes 5-0. Thank you very much. All right, let's go on to the next continued items to be heard. Starting with slot 4, correct?
No, slot 4 was 4. So your first case will be Z23.
Z23, all right.
And I'll bring that in. Zoning case Z23 of 2020, Parkland Capital 2 LLC, RM12 and R20 to GC for the purpose of convenience store fuel sales. At the northwest corner of Atlanta Road and Dana Drive. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here virtually opposed to this case? There's no one virtually opposed to this case, and we'll check the audience with the Chairman Board to see if there's anyone here in person opposed to this. Chairman Board, there are 5 people here in person opposing the zoning case of D23.
Okay.
Presentation, and then move on to opposition.
Morning, Mr. Sams.
Chairman, good morning. Good to see you and the other board members as well. For the record, my name is Garvis Sams. I'm with the law firm of Sams, Larkin, Huff, and Valley, and represent Park Lane Capital concerning this application for rezoning. Park Lane is its principal is Mr. Thornton Morris. He's here with me today, so both he and I will be able to respond to any questions or concerns you may have at the appropriate time. And as well, I believe our engineer is here. I could get Cornelius to orient that GIS sign back there. Anyway, what you can see here is a piece of property. It's a 1.088 acre tract of land, which, as you can see, is located in Atlanta Road and Daniel Drive in Cobb County, very near the city of Smyrna boundaries. In fact, in terms of its nearness, it's actually to be annexed, but we thought it was appropriate to keep it in Cobb County. All the other issues we've recently dealt with, Mr. Chairman, and others, has been along this corridor that you're seeing here. The site is outlined with the dashed line. It has the word site out to the left, so you can see where it's situated. The entirety of that is within a community activity center, county's future land use map, as you might suspect. And to the north are apartments that exist, have been there for a long time, Belmont Crossing. To the south is an HVAC company that's in operation and, of course, has been for a number of years. There's a subdivision this is oriented north-south. If you look to your left, there's a subdivision down Daniel Drive. Daniel Drive starts at the southernmost end of our site and then curves around in a rather curvilinear fashion to get back down into the neighborhood. So we're at substantial remove actually from the neighborhood itself, with a parcel that's in between us and platted lots along Daniel Drive within that subdivision. This property is zoned, if you could go, Cornelius, to the GIS map. Good. As you can see, the property has a split zoning of RM12, having once been a part of the RM12 you can see on the northwestern part of the property. So the little sliver on our north is RM12. The balance of the property is zoned R20, but again, to reiterate the importance of this, that it's within a community activity center and the future land use map. What Park Lane proposes is a rezoning of this property from the RM12 and the R20. The application was for GC. We have since, as a part of Planning Commission's recommendations and discussions with area residents, and also the District Commissioner and District Planning Commissioner have deleted that. So now we're seeking a CRC classification, which is consistent, of course, with the community activity center within which it is located. The application was actually and originally heard by the Planning Commission. We appeared that morning, having not heard anything from anyone with any degree of issues that hadn't been addressed and resolved. But we got here, came off the consent agenda. There were 3 people who spoke in opposition. Since that time, we've revised the site plan. And what I'll do, I'll get into the specifics of the revisions to the site plan. And if I can get IT to go to the next photo or the next slide, I think you'll be able to see, well, that's the site plan. If you could orient it, it's pretty good. Interesting graphics and imagery, but luckily you have all this information that's in front of you in terms of what your staff has provided to you as well. So since we filed our stipulation letter on March 3rd, 2020. There's been a lot of things that have taken place, most specifically the site plan. What we did there originally, in response to some issues that Daniel Drive residents had, what we did was to change the point of ingress and egress. Originally a right in, right out. Actually, originally full turning, then right in, right out, and then right in. And now we are agreeable, and I believe the commissioner is going to suggest to you that it would be more appropriate for it to be no entrance, no point of ingress, egress onto Daniel Drive, which puts everything we have, as you can see, on to Atlanta Road. This is the architectural style and composition of the convenience store. This will be a convenience store of approximately 3,500 square feet, and then it's got an ancillary retail component as you're looking at this to your left that will be utilized as well. I believe the commissioner is going to have some stipulations as to what she's not particularly enamored with seeing here, and that's fine. I think that's based upon some of the input which the residents have had. If we could go back to the site plan, I think what you're going to see is the positioning of the building, of course, the positioning of the pumps that go with the commercial component, and of course the C-store. The C-store will ultimately be, hopefully have to go through a separate process from this entitlement process for purposes of gaining the ability to sell alcohol and beer, like most convenience stores. The retail component, we're agreeing that it's not going to have the sale of alcoholic beverages. There's a drive-through component, and the revised site plan, as you saw, shows the queuing and stacking, and the ordering, or the position of the ordering box there is sufficient to stack 8+ vehicles, as you can see there. And now this plan shows right-in only. Through my discussions yesterday with the commissioner, that access on Daniel Road goes away. So there's some stipulations the commissioner wants to add to that ancillary retail component that has a drive-through window, and understandably so. And we're willing to work with the commissioner, or either for that use to come back to the district commissioner as a part of the plan review process. We've been in discussions with the area residents. They simply don't want the property to be developed. They may say something different today, but that was the position the residents with whom I spoke, which future land use map dictates it, policy considerations of the board dictated. Your staff's recommendation for approval also gives you impetus and support for it. And then the unanimous recommendation to the planning commission after the 3 in opposition the last time, I think speaks eloquently to the fact that it's appropriate from a land use planning perspective. You have all the stipulations and conditions that could possibly and eventually come up. So we think it's appropriately positioned, Mr. Chairman. We simply ask that, based on our presentation today, that you and the board follow the recommendations of your professionals in the Planning Commission and take action approving this application, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Brown, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sams. Is there anybody else? Do we have time left for anybody else to speak in support? John? John, I can't hear you. Okay. Before you get started, I need to talk to Mr. Peterson on the screen for 1 second. Was there any time left for those who want to speak in support, and did anybody else want to speak if there was time left?
There are 2.5 minutes left, Mr. Chairman, and there's no one else in here except for the applicant.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure we give everybody the time it's allocated for them. All right, now we can have those in opposition. The first speaker, please, and just let us know who you are and where you live.
Ken Daniel Drive. I did speak at the Planning Commission meeting, and I have not spoken with anyone, with the applicant, with regard to this since that meeting. Still have the same objections. It's the actual use of this. I understand that this is Atlanta Road and that this will be developed, but it's this type of use. Using this for a gas station, a convenience store, and an unidentified drive-through. That's an awful lot of commercial activity to put on this small package at the end of a residential street. And plus, the hours that have been specified is 7 in the morning until 11 at night. That's a lot of long hours and a lot of activity for this particular place. Understand that with DOT, they're not recommending a traffic light here. And I understand that. There's not a great distance. A little further south on Atlanta Road from here is the road. A little further north is a light for George McMillan, which goes that underpass that goes over to the Lockheed side. So I understand that that's a short distance to be putting in another traffic light, and I don't want a traffic light, but again, when you've got this much activity and you're expecting customers coming in for the gas station, customers coming in for the convenience store, and this drive-through, it's going to make it very difficult to get in and out of this property. We currently, if it's not going to show the way that the graphic that you've got up now, but when you are coming up Daniel Drive to Atlanta Road, there's a slight grade there. So it makes it difficult. You really have to pull almost up and into Atlanta Road before you can see northward. We've already got, and the now shows that you've got Daniel Drive, then you've got this applicant's parcel. Then there's another parcel, which is not part of this one, but there's a driveway for it. I assume. Then you've got the apartment, fairly large apartment complex. It's over density. Then above that, you've got a fairly large townhome community. So you're going to have traffic coming out of there. And it really makes it, this is a very short span to have all of these traffic coming in and out of here and trying to see. So I think just from a traffic point of view, that's a consideration. Then there's the crime issue that are usually associated with any type of a convenience store. You've got loitering, you've got slider crimes, you've got robberies, and again, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And this is this close to a residential street. He said it was offset, but as you can see from that graphic, it is not very far from the backyard of some of these houses that have been there for so many years. I did speak inadvertently. The applicant did not know who I was, introduced himself, and what he said at that time is that he thought he had a tenant for the service station part and the convenience store, but he didn't know who it was going to be for the drive-thru. The idea of having approval for a drive-thru that you don't even know who the tenant's going to be or what kind of a business, this is another thing that is of concern for us. So thank you very much for your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Other speakers in opposition, please?
My name's Johnny Turner. I live at 902 Daniels Drive. I want to duplicate everything that Mr. Daniels said. The week prior to this, or a month and a half prior to this, we submitted a document to Ms. Burrell's office in opposition. Everybody in the residence signed that opposition. I turned it over to Ms. Burrell's office, but she did not get it until last Thursday. That was over a month earlier. For some reason or another, it just never did make it across her desk. I submitted another copy of it to the clerk's office here today. In the last week alone, there's been 22 thefts, 6 assaults, and one arrest in a 5-mile radius of this address right here. I don't think anybody does not recognize the potential of crime in the lottery and the thing that goes on with those kind of things. We don't need it. We don't want it. I don't know how you can make it any plainer than that. We've got 30 signatures on this resident list that are here today raising their hand is what that thing's supposed to represent. I'd like for y'all to understand that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Others in opposition?
Yes, sir. There's other people in opposition. We used to give us a little time in between each person repleting the tables, and then before they step up to the microphone. So.
Yeah, well, we won't count the cleaning time against the 10 minutes.
Just give them a moment for them to be able to step up.
Sure.
It's James Otley. I'm here to speak in opposition of this rezoning. I want to mirror everything that the other two gentlemen have said. We've got 30 people. Effectively, because of, I'm going to say, mishandling of that petition by Ms. Burrell's office, been there for a month, as I understand it, we got 30 people whose voices need to be heard. Another set of folks who are unrepresented in this are the Hispanic families that live in the neighborhood and on the street. An interpreter was requested, if I'm not mistaken, at the last meeting, and no information was given back or in support of that. Apparently, the gentleman here got a call after the meeting took place on how to get or obtain an interpreter for Hispanic families that live in the neighborhood on the street in order for their voices to be heard. I'm assuming it was an unintentional misstatement by counsel here, saying that the residents do not want this parcel developed. That is not the case. And like I said, I presume that was an unintentional statement. It's fine for the property to be developed, but let's keep it as the zoning that it is. Zoning codes are there for a reason. For there to be a change in the zoning code, there must be a compelling reason, given the inconsistencies, some of the processes of this, interpreter not being provided or information on that being given after the meeting took place. I received one letter of notice. I was not even made aware of the Zoom meeting or the ability to sign on to it. It certainly seems that this does get changed. There's some inconsistencies present in the process. I also think that because there are plenty of commercial sites up and down Atlanta Road where this type of use is appropriate or could be put in, there's no compelling reason to change zoning, the established zoning of this property in this activity center overlay to a use such as this, which is incompatible with the neighborhood behind it, that's incompatible with the traffic patterns, as has been discussed by the gentleman before me. And we are sternly in opposition to this for all those reasons.
Thank you, sir. Others in opposition?
My name is Elizabeth Hardy. I'm a new resident on Daniel Drive. We're actually in the process of closing on the house this week. I'm a lifetime resident of Smyrna in that area. I've seen that area go from bad to worse, and right now, Smyrna's a hot spot. There's a lot of growth, a lot of good stuff coming around Windy Hill, and I feel like this area has a chance to piggyback on that. I think that there are already 8 convenience stores that advertise liquor, tobacco, and lotteries in that area, and I just don't want to see something added to that. I'd like to see something happen that would benefit the area.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Others in opposition?
Chairman, that was the last last one was in opposition.
Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Burrow.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. First of all, I would like to make sure that, the petition opposing this is submitted for the record to the clerk. And, I'm not sure if that was submitted to the clerk at the planning commission meeting, but when I scheduled a virtual meeting with the three individuals that spoke at planning commission, whose email and phone numbers I got from the sign-in sheet, which is all I had to go by of the residents. I didn't have this petition. So we did have a meeting last Thursday, virtual meeting, so that I could hear their concerns, and I also, after hearing from them, also met with or spoke with the applicant's attorney and made some additional changes to the site plan and additional stipulations. Originally in the planning commission minutes, the hours were from 7 a.m. to midnight. And now the applicant has agreed to 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. There will be no access on Daniel Drive. And the access on Atlanta Road is a right-in, right-out only. So it's not full access. DOT has checked the Daniel Drive Atlanta Road intersection in the past, and it does, and recently, and it does not warrant a signal. And if you look at the GIS, with closing the access to Daniel Road, there won't be traffic going down Daniel Road to get into the convenience store. All the access will be right in, right out only, from Atlanta Road. So there won't be traffic going down Daniel Drive from this store, with no access. The property behind there is vacant, and it is not part of this, but it really is what parallels to Daniel Drive, the residents that spoke in Daniel Drive. Also, I was made aware last Thursday during our virtual meeting that there were several Hispanic residents, and I asked if they wanted to speak, and I would check on getting an interpreter. I checked with community development. I checked with the court system, and asked the two residents that I spoke with on the virtual meeting last Thursday to please let me know if an interpreter was needed, and they didn't let me know, and so I didn't request one. But I was made aware that there was a need for an interpreter had the residents that needed it wanted to speak. This is in a CAC, which is conducive to, or which allows for the convenience store. And it's been recommended that instead of GC, it be deleted to CRC. And based on the stip letters the stip letter from Mr. Sams dated March 3rd. There will be security cameras at this property and lighting for security reasons. And there's some other things that I'm planning to add to this. So is there any other comments, or I'm ready to make a motion?
Okay, we'll entertain your motion, Commissioner Burrow. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to delete Z23 to CRC, subject to the following. The stip letters from Mr. Garvis Sams dated March 3rd, 2020 and June 24th, 2020. Maximum impervious surface of 70%. Right in, right out only on Atlanta Road. No access on Daniel Drive. Hours of operation 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. No alcohol sales at the drive-through window. Final site plan and building elevations to be approved by the district commissioner. Final landscape plan to be reviewed by the county arborist and approved by the district commissioner. The retail use to be approved by the district commissioner. Staff and planning commission comments and recommendations not otherwise in conflict.
Do I have a second? I'll second it for discussion purposes. All right, comments from the board, please.
Chairman, I have a comment. Commissioner Cupid.
Sure, Commissioner Cupid, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm particularly familiar with this area. A lot of Atlanta Road was in District 4, that is north of Windy Hill, prior to map changes in 2016. I appreciate Commissioner Burrell's consideration for the community and removing access to Daniel Drive, and also in reducing the hours from midnight to 11 p.m. But I do think the challenges with this area and the desire for this community to have a use that is more compatible is overarching to me, knowing the challenges that this community has. This is a more moderate income area of the county. And even just looking at the future land use and the zoning around that community, they have really not been given a proper buffer that is communicated in our comprehensive plan to drop the intensity from low density residential between more intense commercial uses. You would anticipate seeing a NAC, medium density residential, higher density residential, some other kind of buffer with these strong intensities that this community has not been afforded. This is not in my district, and I have not really looked at that future land use as closely as I have during this hearing today. But I just think it's unfortunate that you see moderate and lower income communities continue to have these very intense uses put adjacent to their communities, and it would not be tolerated in other areas. You have other communities where there's significant opposition just to have MDR next to LDR or HDR next to MDR, but it's easy to okay it for communities like this. And I can't, in good faith, I can't do that today. Their concerns about crime are valid. Their concerns about wanting to see this area improve based on past history is valid. The idea that an alcohol use could be introduced close to this community, and it still would have to come back for an alcohol license, but even to hear the only moderation of that in this zoning is to not allow it through the drive-through, it can potentially introduce another use which could diminish the quality of life for this area based on the tremendous amount of challenges that this part of the county has, particularly in the Fair Oaks and Lockheed Dobbins area. I do think any resident that moves into a single family home has expectations of having a quality of life that's comparable to anyone living in any other area of the county that should be protected in some sense. And I know it's in a CAC, and I think technically there's justification for moving forward, but we still have a wide range of discretion to protect health, safety, and welfare of communities beyond what's technically put on a map. And there are various uses that can be supported in a CAC. And knowing I've actually walked this, I've run along this roadway. I actually know a vendor that lives here, so I'm here not just as a commissioner, but as a customer often, and just as a runner in Cobb. And I just, considering that this could be added here, I just do not see adding value, and I think it could diminish the health, safety, and welfare of this area. So I can't support it today.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Thanks. Other commissioners, other comments? Commissioner Rod, I can't see your picture. Do you have any comments on this?
I don't have any comments. I'm here.
Okay.
I see my
okay, that's fine. There's there's a strip down here at the bottom, and I see three of you, but I can't see you unless you speak. So I just want to make sure that I entertain any questions you might have. But
I don't have any comments.
Okay. All right. Any other commissioner have any other comments? Seeing none, I'm going to call a question, but I'm going to ask for a voice vote from each of you. I'll call you because I can't see all the pictures. So Commissioner Burrow, do you support this? Okay, Commissioner Burrow does. Commissioner Cupid, I understand you do not support this.
I don't.
Gabriel.
No, I do not support this application.
Okay, Commissioner Ott, do you support or not support this application?
Yes.
You support it. All right. Well, I'm also in opposition, so the motion fails 2-3 with Commissioners Ott and Burrow support, and Commissioner Cupid, Gamble, and Boyce in opposition. All right. Let's go on to Z24.
Okay. And before we move on to the next case, Mr. Chairman Board, there has been a request by the applicant for other business, item number 27, Rekeep Investments, Inc., to continue this case into your August 18th zoning hearing date. Staff would ask the board to continue other business item number 27 to your next hearing.
That's Commissioner Cupid.
Okay. Yes, I'm so moved.
All right, I'll second it. Any discussion? Again, I'll ask for a voice vote. Commissioner Ott, do you support? Okay, Commissioner Gambrill?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Burrell? Commissioner Burrell, do you support this motion to continue?
She says yes. She said she can't press the mute button. I hear her in her office.
Okay.
Welcome, Commissioner Burrell.
We'll add visual interpreter to your existing duties, Commissioner Cupid. All right, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Now it's off.
Very good. Okay, we're good now. Passes 5-0 to continue OB 27. Okay, now let's go on to Z24.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The zoning case of Z24 of 2020, Grant Acquisition Company LLC, express rezoning from NRC and GC to O&I for the purpose of a clinic in land lots 693, 694, 747, and 748 of the 17th district. The property is located southwest of the intersection of Cumberland Parkway and Atlanta Road. There are 4 people here in person opposing the case. There are 3 people here virtually opposing the case, with one of those 3 virtuals wanting to speak in opposition. The applicant is present, and we would ask the board to start the public hearing on zoning case Z24.
Okay, we're ready. Those in support? Good morning, Mr. Moore.
morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Kevin Moore here on behalf of the applicant and owners in this application for rezoning. This application concerns 4.9, almost 5 acres located at the intersection of Atlanta Road and Cumberland Parkway. And I believe they're going to first show us the GIS map of the future land use plan. If they can put that up. We get started. There we go. Perfect. Thank you very much, Tim. He's always so helpful. There in the middle of your screen, you see this property, which is almost 5 acres, located along West Atlanta Road, primarily though along Atlanta Road along the right-hand side, Cumberland Parkway along the top. This application is to rezone the property to O&I for a medical office building. It has received a lot of attention. Part of what I want to do today with you, and you'll hear me reference in a number of times, is I really want to try to separate the fact and fiction in this case and in this application and go through those with you and highlight those major points. Because it's certainly our belief that a lot of the fiction that's been driven and published about this case has been done so based on some other agenda other than whether this project is appropriate from a zoning and land use perspective. Speaking first to the land use plan, as you can see, this property is located within a neighborhood activity center primarily. It also has a small portion of it that is medium density residential. You can also see the surrounding area, in particular, property across Atlanta Road to the right is also in a neighborhood activity center. The fiction that's been created is that our proposal for a medical office building with O&I zoning is inconsistent or incompatible with the future land use plan. The fact is that's not the case. As noted by staff in its analysis, the proposal for the medical office building, in particular what neighborhood activity centers can do, is serve as the transitional category between more intensive uses and less intensive uses. This property is located in close proximity to 285 and a regional activity center as well as a community activity center. In particular, these parcels that are the subject of this application fall within a specific area policy guideline that encourages mixed use, medical office, and professional offices in the neighborhood activity center area. This specific area policy guideline takes precedent over the basic zoning and future land use plan compatibility hearings. Again, the fact is this proposal is consistent with your future land use plan, and that can obviously be proven by the proofs in the pudding. Just across the street is also the Wellstar Medical Office building. You can see it there on your screen on the right-hand side, which is almost double in size of what we're proposing, likewise in a neighborhood activity center. Again, back to fiction. Now turning to our presentation materials themselves, take a minute to switch over to our presentation materials so that I can again review many of the details of this proposed project for you. Takes a minute for that to switch over. Here we can go. Again, representing Branch Properties, the owner and developer of the West Village community there at Atlanta Road and 285, and presenting this West Village Medical Office building. We can go to the next slide, please. I want to take you through our detailed site plan so that you can see that now on your screen. Again, Atlanta Road across the top, Cumberland Parkway on your left-hand side. We are proposing a medical office building. It will have one single access on Atlanta Road. You can see that has been relocated and shifted further down Atlanta Road at the request of DOT. In addition, we have three access points on West Atlanta Road for our primary access. Also of importance when you look at this site plan, specifically along West Atlanta Road, you start on your right-hand side of the subject property, move across Atlanta Road on the opposite side of this property, what's called 4400 West. You can see it on the corner there. It's a townhome development that has since now expanded across most of that West Atlanta Road frontage to the corner. Not to quite get to that corner parcel. I really want to highlight what Branch Properties has done in this regard. Along West Atlanta Road, you'll see the heavily landscaped area that we have identified as a potential linear park area. That's as wide as 47 feet goes down to 10 feet at its smallest in terms of its width. Our plan is to provide for extensive landscaping in this area, but more importantly, we have proposed as a stipulation that the landscaping of both that area and the community park area you see on the right-hand side of your screen and site plan, that all of that landscaping be placed in the hands of a landscaping review committee. This landscaping plans will be shared with community representatives, community groups for their input prior to final approval by Cobb County Community Development, so that we can gain that community input. But the land and area is set aside to create something that is of a community benefit, including extensive landscaping, park area, as well as community art potential for the residents and for the community at large. Going now to the next screen. The next several screens are the elevations of the proposed building. We do have elevations from each side of the building. The view from the northern park area of this building, as you can see, is beautifully architecturally, specially designed for this project to meet the demands and the requirements of having a Class A medical office building. As we go through these slides, you can see that at this intersection, it will be beautifully appointed. We also have the view from the park, the actual corner, up as well as from West Atlanta Road. And then finally, the last slide of the building elevation. Again, it's been presented or discussed that this building needs a variance for height. That is absolutely not correct. Initially, we were seeking a variance for height under the O&I category. However, we have removed that variance request and have confirmed with our architects that the design standards will meet the height requirements and maximum heights in this entire building, including all aspects of the building, will be under the maximum of 52 feet of the Cobb County ordinance. Next slide, please. One of the major pieces of fiction that has been generated even as recently as this weekend is that we refused or did not meet with the community. That's absolute fiction. The fact is, starting in January, we started to socialize and circulate the plans for this medical office building amongst community members that we were aware of. There was plenty of activity on social media regarding this proposal, receiving comments, making comments. Thereafter, we have held 2 in-person community meetings as well as a virtual Zoom community meeting that had over 100 participants. There has been tremendous community outreach by this applicant, and we have listened. We haven't always agreed. We have listened, and I want to just highlight for you where we have accommodated those neighborhood requests. We have added the southern park area to protect 4400 as well as the community as well, so there is a beautifully landscaped portion of this property that's significant. It's just almost nearly a half acre. We've added the linear park area that can be landscaped to again provide further connectivity in a park-like setting, a minimum of 10 feet up to 47 feet in width. We've added connections to Silver Comet, as well as eliminated 2 curb cuts, reduced cut-through traffic, reduced parking counts, reduced impervious surface, reduced operating hours, and specifically have reduced operating hours in accordance with the proposed draft of the stipulations provided by community members we were working with. We've had contributions to a community sign and art, added overall over 26 community-driven stipulations. Next slide, please. As it relates to traffic, which has been a major discussion point, you can see on this screen, taken directly from the traffic study, the major traffic impact that's been discussed is on Oakdale Road. That is the complaint that traffic impact from a doctor's office would be tremendous and upsetting and ruin their way of life. That's a fiction. As you can see from this slide, 5% of the traffic to be generated and arrive and leave from this site will affect that area along Oakdale Road, or come from or leave and go that route. Put that in terms of raw data, at the peak hour, an hour in the morning, and the peak hour in the afternoon, that is 5 or 6 cars. The remainder of the time, there's no more than 2 or 3 cars per hour that may or may not come up that area. That's the actual traffic impact from a proposed medical office building, which indeed gives you the fact of this proposal from a traffic perspective. Again, This proposed rezoning and medical office building has been overwhelmingly recommended for approval by your professional staff. It has been overwhelmingly recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. At the end of the day, this is a doctor's office, medical office building, one in which all of us have gone to see a doctor. It is absolutely ideal for this location and ideal for minimizing impact to the surrounding area while adding yet another useful, much needed service within the area to go along with overall redevelopment that has happened over the last 15 years at West Village. It's ideal, and we certainly respectfully request your approval of this rezoning application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else in support? And we have time left for that? Okay. Seeing none, those in opposition, remember, I understand there's a number of speakers, so just be mindful of the fact that you have 10 minutes for you to address your points. So let us know who you are, and the first speaker, please.
And, oh yeah, sure, thank you. You tell me when, will you tell me when to start?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm reading, that's not my,
Yeah.
Cornelius, can you, thank you. Cornelius, can you put up my presentation, please? Oh, sorry. My name is Alette Stage. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay. My name is Alette Stage. Good morning. I am the spokesperson for the over 200 homeowners adjacent to C24, the 417 local residents and families that have signed our petition, and the people who sent you over 80 letters. Despite Attorney Moore's assertion to the contrary, the many meetings and communications were not held with our neighborhood. In fact, we've had 2 interactive dialogues with the applicant. One in May, a 60-minute video Zoom presentation with no real Q&A, and one in person just 2 weeks ago. We have shared our community's key concerns and offered possible solutions in an attempt to hopefully reach a compromise. Neither branch nor Northside were interested. They chose not to revise their plans, so we're here today. Cornelius, you can start. Okay. Our group, Residents for Responsible Development, originally formed to give voice to our homeowners directly impacted by C24. Cornelius, can you start your presentation, please? Can you pause? The room? Oh. Okay, sorry, back.
We'll give you an opportunity to for your slides to come up first, okay? But
I appreciate that.
We'll accommodate you. We're still having some technical issues here, so All right. Is this your presentation on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so.
Go ahead and bring the presentation now. Our group is called Residents for Responsible Development. We were formed originally to give voice to the 200 homeowners directly impacted by C-24. We are pro-development. We wish to protect our community. We have spent months obtaining the information needed to render an informed opinion on our case. It was not easy, with incomplete, missing, and conflicting information for site plans, 3 SIP letters, 3 traffic studies, staff note revisions, meetings with DOT, and real estate professionals, and a lot of zoning code research. We also met with the surrounding neighborhoods and incorporated their feedback as well. And where the community stands today is that Northside is welcome as a tenant, but not this development and not as it is presented today. Next slide. Because of the many emails that you've received, you already know why the community does not want this development. It doesn't adhere to either land use or architectural guidelines, and the requested zoning is inappropriate for this location. The applicant wants numerous variances to overdevelop the site, and the traffic impact is negative. So I'm just here to add detail and color. Next slide. The project was provided as a natural fit for this location. Next slide, please. We're a unique corner in Cobb County, kind of like an island surrounded by 3 major arterial roadways on the 285. Our main road is Oakdale, the 2-lane street with homes on both sides. There are only 6 points of access, 4 on South Cobb Drive, 2 on Atlanta Road, with Pine Street being the only access point to our community for people traveling from the 285. The far northern side, part of the area, which is the site of C-24, lost access to the Cumberland Parkway and Old Atlanta Road years ago. It became a hard-to-reach den at the corner. The reason I share this is to show you why the traffic impact of development in that particular area requires special consideration. Next slide, please. We are next slide. We are a really cool community. Oakdale is largely residential, from R20 to condos and apartments. Mixed use, so mixed use in, can we stop this? Okay, we here? Are we good? Alrighty, very challenging. Okay. We're largely a residential condos. We have some condos, apartments, lots of R20. There's mixed use in West Village, the area in yellow, and low intensity commercial on the outskirts in green. There's 1 2-story office building. There's retail restaurants and a couple storage facilities along South Cobb Drive. We're a pedestrian-oriented community. People walk to restaurants and local businesses, and with the completion of the Silver Comet Trail next summer, there'll be even more feet on the street. To the north, we have high-end new residential development, new residences under construction, and the far north corner is the area in need of redevelopment. With this rapid growth and change, Cobb County wisely identified this district as needing special attention for future development and stated those guidelines in Small Area Policy Guide, NACP 43. Next slide. There's 5 components to that policy, and they are transition and skill and compatibility with the community, mixed-use development and professional offices focused on the local community to reduce trip traffic, and buffering and screening to ensure desirability and viability of the neighborhood, and a series of recommended zoning codes. And as you can see here, office and institutional is not one of the recommended zoning codes. Of course, you've approved zoning that didn't meet all of these guidelines, but this plan does not meet a single one of them. Next slide. In our community, you'll see attractive architectural detailing, as you see on the right of this slide, wide sidewalks, etc., all built in accordance with the county's architectural guidelines for the Atlanta Road corridor. The proposed building design makes absolutely no attempt to meet any of these guidelines. I respect your expertise, next, and will refrain from reading the Cobb County Code of Ordinances to you. This project does not comply with 3 of the regulations. The location should be in or on the edge of CAC or RAC, provide a step down from more intensive commercial uses. It should include evergreen landscape buffers, and it should be appropriately scaled in relation to the transitional nature of the immediate area. Next. On the left of this slide, you'll see that the project is neither in or on the edge of CAC or RAC. It is in fact in NAC and directly adjacent to a large residential district with homes valued between $450,000 to $1 million. This project would be the single most intensive commercial use in our community and by no means provides step-down zoning. And it certainly does not provide any transition in scale or buffering from the neighboring residential district. Any reference to Wellstar is irrelevant. It is across Atlanta Road and at least 900 feet away from the proposed north side building as the crow flies. Relevant, as you see on the right, is that the Enclave subdivision is within 250 feet and 4400 West neighborhood is even closer, less than 100 feet away from the site. This is too close for OI zoning. Next. If approved, residents from the 4400 West will see a huge parking lot and a modern 3-story office building from their home. This will negatively impact quality of life and their home values. So I ask you, where in Cobb County is OI zoning allowed adjacent to a high-end residential area without a buffer zone? Next. Some projects require zoning variance to make them work. In this case, the variance requested are unreasonable. To make this 76,000 square foot medical center work on this site, the applicant proposes 88 more parking spaces than required and plans to accomplish this by reducing the landscape buffers, adding 10,000 square feet of additional impervious surface, and using part of the proposed landscape license land that Cobb County owns right now for parking. This project is simply too big for this site. Overdevelopment is not a valid reason for requesting zoning variance. Reasonable would be to reduce the building size so the site can have 70% impervious surface max and right-sized landscape buffers and setbacks. Next. C24 predicts 1,420 daily trips, and we've been told repeatedly that the traffic impact is going to be minimal and far less than any apartment for residential. So we used the applicant's own traffic study to compare traffic for 2 projects, C64, which is West Village Phase 3 currently under construction, and C24. We studied the data for R, which we consider up in the upper right-hand corner, R critical intersection, the Pine Street entrance, Pine and West Village, West Atlanta, and West Atlanta Oakdale Road. This is how we learned that this project will actually generate 13% more rush hour trip traffic than 314 and 40 townhomes of West Village combined. Next slide. 3 traffic studies have been submitted and questions still remain. What we do know for certain is that the level of service at our 4 critical intersections will drop significantly, sometimes E or F. There are no proposed system improvements that can mitigate this. SIM studies cannot predict what happens when intersections back up and people take detours through our community. And when you build a large medical center in a location that offers less than 50% access from Atlanta Road, you create a tremendous traffic burden on the neighboring community. Next slide. We suggest a compromise solution that we could support this development. Like I said, we support Northside coming to the community, but what we suggested was a smaller Northside facility, think LRO, which sits in NAC, max 70% impervious surface, proper landscape buffering, compatible architecture with our community, and the inclusion of some community-oriented development out of respect to the pedestrian nature of our area. We also made smaller acts, but they're basically a moot point right now. Next slide. The applicant touts its many accommodations, but what did we really get? They gave us a clean SIP letter, tree removal review, and co-reviewed the landscape plan. They made accommodations to address DOT's concern, and they added things to make the deal look better. But these things were not items that the community asked for, were not requested by the community. They're all just fluff to take the eye off the fact that this proposal is a lopsided financial win for branch properties and a loss for the community. As your constituents, we implore you to insist on a mutual win, to protect the quality of life and the integrity of the over 200 neighboring houses in our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for that presentation. Others in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, there is no one else here in opposition.
Okay, Commissioner Ott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was collecting my thoughts last night, I thought that it would be important to kind of start off with a little bit of history of the area, since all of this began before everyone's time on the Board of Commissioners. Back in June of 2004, the concept of West Village was presented to the Board of Commissioners. It was an assemblage of 47 properties that had previously been proposed for a super Walmart, which the community at the time was opposed. The area was full of crack houses and other undesirable uses. I remember the day that former Commissioner Jolie Thompson sat in the front loader and tore down the first structure to start the project. I was on the Planning Commission at the time, and this project was modeled after Birkdale Village, which is located just north of Charlotte. Before the case was heard, the commissioner, myself, and about 10 other community leaders went up to Charlotte to see Birkdale Village to see exactly what it was that was being proposed and how this would help redevelop the area. From the beginning, the project was never planned on being purely residential. It was proposed that there would be apartments, townhomes, cluster homes, retail, and commercial. It was also envisioned that the project would help redevelop the Oakdale area by bringing new residents and retail to the area, which you can see it has done. 16 years later, the project has achieved many of the original goals set forth by Commissioner Thompson and the board at that time. During the years, many big box retails were proposed and deemed to be inappropriate for the area. During my time on the board, I've seen proposals for a Kroger Superstore, a Target, and a Lidl. In each case, they were just too big for the area. So let's kind of talk about the zoning and the land use. That's been kind of an issue that keeps coming up. Moving now to 2020, the board is being asked to consider medical offices to be added to the area. Before discussing some of the issues brought up by the community, I want to talk a little bit about this current zoning category and land use designation issue. Currently, the property has a collection of zoning categories and land use designations, as you saw in Kevin Moore's presentation. The approximately 1 acre is zoned NRC and the remaining 3.9 acres is zoned GC. The 1 acre area is designated MDR on the land use map, and while the 3.9 acres is under a NAC, Neighborhood Activity Center designation. The GC portion, which is located in the NAC, creates the problem for the board since the GC is not allowed in a NAC. The board can't arbitrarily downzone the GC portion to fit the NAC because this would be an unconstitutional taking according to the courts. So the board left to address the mismatch of the zoning with the land use that we have. Fortunately, there is direction in the comp plan, which I believe gives direction and shows the intent of the previous boards related to this area. As you heard, the property is designated as NAC-P43, and it's under a specific area policy guideline. This is something that we don't see very often, but it was used by Commissioner Thompson and others back when he was working on redeveloping Atlanta Road to kind of give guidance as to where the board was thinking of going. These guidelines take precedent over the standard NAC guidelines in the code. The significant part of this guideline says, and I'm going to quote from the code, any development should ensure appropriate transitions in scale and general compatibility with existing stable residential communities. Mixed-use developments, medical office, and professional office uses should be encouraged in the community activity center and neighborhood activity center areas. Allowing mixed-use developments and professional office uses will assist in creating new residential and employment opportunities, as well as reduce traffic congestion and improve traffic flow by reducing total number of trips on the overall transportation system. Mixed-use developments adjacent to stable single-family residential neighborhoods should provide a change in scale or buffering screening that will ensure the desirability and viability of the surrounding community. Obviously, some of those things are in contention, as we saw a little earlier. The following pictures, and Brad, what I'd like you to show is the pictures of the surrounding developments. They are a combination of mixed-use residential medical offices as proposed in the specific area policy guidelines. I believe Brad has some pictures that he can put up on the screen. He's supposed to have pictures. And while Brad is getting his pictures up, basically they are a picture of the Ivy Walk intersection, which is catty corner across. It's a picture of the Wellstar medical buildings. It's also the townhome community across the street, and then West Village. Brad, are we going to get those pictures? All right, while we're waiting for the pictures, I'm going to move on to the community concerns. So I'd like to, oh, here we go. Okay, so catty corner across, this is Ivy Walk. You can see Next picture here, this is right across Atlanta Road. This is the townhome community, which is right next to Wellstar. Next slide. All right, well, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move on because we've got a lot of stuff to do today. So first off, I want to thank all the people that took the time and sent emails and letters to the board. I want to thank Alette and her group of folks. I've met with them virtually and received many correspondence from her. The first issue is a question about the lack of meetings. You know, there have been 5 meetings with the community for this project. As it was working its way through the zoning process. You know, unfortunately, in these difficult times with the pandemic, not all of them were allowed to be in person. I know some of them are virtual. And of course, that always makes it a little bit harder for folks to, you know, kind of get their word in. But these meetings started all the way back in January. And the most recent was 2 weeks ago. Some of these meetings with the leaders you have received emails from. The last one lasted for 2 hours. Additionally, I've had multiple meetings with both the developer and Northside Hospital and that same group of community leaders. So I think that there was a lot of time for discussion and also to hear the community's concerns. There's been changes made in the project. The next one is traffic. There's been quite a lot of discussion about the traffic this proposal would generate. I know that some of the members of the community don't agree with the traffic engineer's report. Unfortunately, no one on this board is a traffic engineer, so I have to rely on the official report. However, this case is somewhat unique in that this is not the first proposal for this type of facility by this user in the district. There is another Northside Medical Office building in East Cobb. The approved plan for that one is 2 office buildings. The first one has been built and it's just over 100,000 square feet. It's located on a local road that is the only way in and out for not only the medical offices, but also for 3 residential neighborhoods, a tennis club, and 3 other office buildings. This road is controlled by a single traffic light. During my tenure on the board, I have not heard of any problems due to traffic generated by this facility. I believe the numbers in the traffic study are correct. I also believe that since there are multiple ways to get in and out of this proposal, traffic is not going to be an issue. So the next issue is that it's too large for the site. And I know that some of the opposition thinks that the Wellstar Medical Building should not be an issue, but I think it is. When I compare the Wellstar Medical offices to this proposal, I found that the 2 sites are fairly compatible in size and scale. The Wellstar site is 9.8 acres and the building is 171,891 square feet. The proposed north side site is 4.9 acres and the proposed building is 75,000 square feet. But let's talk about intensity, because that's been one of my big things during my time here. So if we look at square foot per acre basis, the Wellstar site is 17,539 square feet per acre. And the proposed north side site is 15,306 square feet per acre. Let's look at another one so we can compare. Ivy Walk, which is across the street. I had to measure some of these on GIS because the tax commissioner's office didn't have all the information. The site is approximately 5.5 acres. You saw a picture of it earlier, and it has approximately 73,000 square feet of development. That works out to 13,272 square feet per acre. And that site is almost completely impervious. There's been some questions about the impervious, and I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit. Additionally, this has a large residential development above and behind the retail and commercial space. So when we talk about transitioning, not compatible with the land use map. As previously discussed, this site zoning, along with many of the other uses on the circle at West Atlanta Road and Oakdale Road, are not compatible with current land use. They are, however, discussed in detail in the specific area policy guidelines for this area that you heard about. And those were put in there for a reason, because Commissioner Thompson, back when he was working on redeveloping this area, wanted it understood what his and the board's overall vision was to try to redevelop this entire area, not just this one site, but the entire area that is covered by the policy guidelines. So we heard a little bit about the transition to the neighborhoods. I talked briefly about Ivy Walk and how the residential is on top of and right immediately behind the retail and commercial, with a similar intensity to what's being proposed. There is also a large area on the west side of West Atlanta Road, sometimes referred to as the Circle, which is 1- and 2-story commercial buildings at this time. Those have been contemplated to be redeveloped, and those would be ideal for the transition that the community has talked about, where LRO and other compatible zoning categories could be placed. The next area of concern is the variances. There are currently 3 variance requests for this proposal. Number 1 is to increase the impervious from a maximum allowable 70% to 74%. Number 2 is to decrease the setback from 35 feet along Atlanta Road to 0. And the third one is to decrease the required 8-foot buffer along West Atlanta Road. Increased impervious. I have concerns about allowing an increase on the impervious for the maximum allowable 70% to the requested 74%. And I will address that in my motion. The 35-foot setback decrease. This property is located alongside the old trolley line, which ran down Atlanta Road into Atlanta. There is currently a very large right-of-way where the old trolley line was located, which provides ample room if DOT ever needed to widen Atlanta Road. The variance request is not to allow the building to be located right along the edge of the road, but instead to be along the edge of the right-of-way, which on the picture that you see on the screen right now, that green area is where the old trolley line was located. So, there's plenty of room if DOT or GDOT needs to expand the road. The final buffer request, Brad, can you put up the drawing with the red highlighting? And while Brad's putting that up, this request as worded does not fully explain, here we go, what is being requested. If you look at this picture, which I asked for from the developer yesterday to kind of get a better understanding of what this 8-foot request really was, you will see the various buffers. And if Brad, can you zoom in on this? So what you see is in the over 900 feet of road frontage, only 98 feet if you take out the curb cuts, has less than the required 8-foot. It's important to note that the part of the development that is the closest to the nearest residential development, which is 4400, has some of the largest buffers. You can see the 47 over 47 feet up close to the building. And there's also the Pocket Park in the southeast end of the property there. All right, thanks, Brad. The next issue is in a letter from Mary Rose Barnes is Young Street abandonment. The proposed site plan shows Young Street as part of the development, and the stipulation letter proposes for the abandonment of Young Street. According to the county attorney, the county is not required to be listed as an applicant for the rezoning. However, as with all right-of-way abandonments, the county will be required to hold public meetings before deciding whether to approve the abandonment of Young Street. If it were not to be abandoned, then the developer would have to come back with a revised plan. Equally, the proposed land swap, which was another issue raised by Mary Rose. As with the abandonment, the county would be required to have public meetings before considering accepting the land swap. The important thing to note about the land swap is that DOT would acquire the rights to the corner. Brad, can we put the GIS map back up? Well, Brad's doing that. DOT would acquire the rights to the corner parcel at Oakdale Road and West Atlanta Road. This could provide an opportunity. If you look there, you can see where Oakdale Road and West Atlanta Road come together. The proposed land swap is for that piece that has the NAC and GC on it. This would provide DOT the opportunity to realign Oakdale Road to make it more of a 90-degree intersection, and also, if necessary, put a traffic light in if it became deemed necessary. But these discussions are for the public hearing when the board considers the land swap. There were a couple things about DOT comments. I don't know if Amy, I think Amy's here. Amy Diaz, are you here?
This is Amy Diaz.
Okay, Amy, I know that in some of your comments, and I know it's difficult for the board because the comments were written months ago, and I know that the site plan has been revised. My understanding is that the entrance has been moved south as requested.
Yes, my understanding, I do not have a full size of the most recent site plan, but my understanding is it's been shifted 50 feet. So you can see that it has been shifted when you look at the site plan. From measuring off on the small one I have, it looks like it is between 275 and 300 feet.
Okay, all right. And then also you had a comment in there about a decel lane. Has that been addressed, or has the decision been made not to have a decel? I know that on some of the bigger roads, you don't like putting decel lanes. The
decel on Atlanta Road?
Yes.
It is included on their site plan.
Okay, all right. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I believe that covers most of the concerns I saw in the numerous emails I've received. I'd like to make a motion so that we can get more discussion from the board.
Okay.
All right, I would like to make a motion to approve Z24 to the O&I zoning category subject to the following stipulations. Number one, the letter from Kevin Moore dated July 15th, 2020 with the following changes and additions. Item number 3, change to read having a maximum gross square footage of 65,000 square feet, which is a reduction in the size of the building. Number 4, add the sentence, the final elevations to be approved by the district commissioner. Number 6, add after at least 8 feet in width, add the statement except as depicted on the 8-foot buffer map PDF, which is the one you just saw. Also change the final sentence, the final landscape plan to be approved by the district commissioner. Number 22, to remove item A, which is the size of the building. I'm sorry, no, it's the change. That's the 22A is removing the variance for impervious. So the impervious will be restricted to the code maximum of 70%. 22B, the final landscape plan will be similar to the 8-foot buffer map PDF and will be approved by the district commissioner. Number 24, add a new sentence, dumpsters will have rubber lids or similar noise reduction lids. Second stipulation is site plan received by the zoning division on July 15th, 2020 with the final site plan to be approved by the district commissioner. Number 3, elevations to be consistent with those shown today and include as West Village MOD additional views, which is what I sent to Brad. Number 4, maximum 65,000 gross square footage. Number 5, maximum of 70% impervious surface. Number 6, fire department comments and recommendations not otherwise in conflict. Number 7, water and sewer comments and recommendations not otherwise in conflict. Number 8, Department of Transportation comments and recommendations not otherwise in conflict, with the exception of items 4 and 5 since the plan has been revised. Number 9, stormwater management comments and recommendations not otherwise in conflict, and to comply with the Atlanta Road Design Guidelines not otherwise in conflict. And Mr. Chairman, that would be my motion.
All right, and I'll second it. So for discussion, any commissioners? Commissioner Burrow. Commissioner Burrow, I believe you're muted.
Kimberly, I can't unmute. Kimberly,
There you are.
You're good. You're good. Okay. You're good.
Yes. One of the main concerns I had with this was the 74% impervious, but Commissioner Ott took care of that. But by reducing the square footage may have helped with that as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burrow. Other commissioners? I don't believe I see or hear anybody wanting to say a comment. Commissioner Cuban, go ahead.
You're muted.
Commissioner Cupid, you're still muted. We'll get this.
Okay, thank you. I'm unmuted.
You're good.
Yes, thank you. We've received a lot of correspondence regarding this, and I'm trying to be as best to be balanced on the interest of the property owner and the residents that are there. I reached out to zoning to also get some clarification on some of the concerns that were addressed. Before us, we have a zoning request for O&I, which I shared doesn't comport with the future land use designation of the site, which is both MDR and NAC. And typically we don't consider, typically staff does not make a recommendation to approve zoning that don't comply with future land use designation. However, they went through some of the analysis that Commissioner Ott went through to look at the specific area policy guidelines and to discuss the contemplation for medical office use. And my observation is, even with the medical office use being considered, that I think that what O&I versus NRC or LRO look at is not just the use, because there's some uses that are shared, but also the scale of the development, where I know that we have some office uses or medical office uses adjacent to residential in the district where it would be perceived that it would be an office use that's smaller in scale, even though that use could be facilitated through multiple zoning categories. And I think that's one of the challenges that the community has shared, is the scale of the site. I did speak with the attorney for the site and asked for the heights of the apartments and some other uses. And even from some of the photographs that were shared today, this building that's being proposed is comparable in height. But I would also observe that this site is uniquely positioned. Even if we try to compare it to the medical office across the street, that medical office is surrounded by OS, NAC, OI, LRO, where this medical office use is surrounded by various types of residential uses, some which are more dense in character, and some which are single family. And so while we could compare the scale to the Wellstar use, or we could compare the scale to some of the HDR, I also think some of the other uses should be taken into consideration. With respect to traffic, this has been a point of contention that's been shared by members of the community. And unfortunately, I'm not in a position to share anything other than hearsay, that there was a desire to see other types of retail on the site. And even with the current future land use map, if there was a NAC, it could attract other retail to the site. And even with NDR, you're looking at high traffic per household. So I'm not a traffic engineer as Commissioner Ott asserted. None of us on the board are, but it's likely that even comporting with some of the future land use designations, that it could generate more traffic than what this site could generate. So that's something that I can't, that I could see that's something I could see arguments for on both sides, that there could be increased traffic with a large office use, but that traffic could be less than what could be introduced under a NAC or medium density residential. One moment. Yeah, just in that last case that was heard, I talked about how there's a transition in uses that are often contemplated, and that those transition in uses, while sometimes look at the specific uses within zoning categories, they often look at the zoning category itself, and zoning categories are recommended for transition in uses. And I believe that the assertions of the community are correct in that, O&I, which is typically in a CAC, is a higher density use. This is not necessarily a transition in uses from that residential property, or you expect to see some buffer of a less intense land use category. Again, I think we can argue use all day, but it's not just the use itself that is being considered, but it's the intensity and scale of that use. And the reality is the intensity and scale of this use does not comport with NAC. It comports to a higher density development. And that, I think, is the rub, is it to get to what was considered in the initial zoning, where you look for mixed use that contemplated offices, did it contemplate a development of this intensity and scale? And even if you look at other surrounding development, there's still consideration for the other residential development that's around it that is not as high in intensity of scale. So I believe that there are arguments on both sides, and this is a difficult decision that's before us. We can look at the history of what was considered with the site, but things change, dynamics change, and what may have been perceived as this site was contemplated, certainly I think may not necessarily have been gleaned by current residents if they were to look at not only the current zoning, but the future land use of the site. They may not have contemplated a use of this nature. So, my thing is here, how can I put myself in the shoes of those who are existing property owners in this area? For the residents, it's a tough situation. This is the community that you're going to have to live in every day. And, whether or not this use comports with your expectations based off of our future land use of the site and the residential use is something I have to consider. Something also to consider is that, Wolfstar is across the street. You have very intense, higher density residential that's in that area that's immediately to the site. And some concessions that have been made to add in green space and to add in some other features to soften this use. So these are all things that I'm weighing, but I certainly see arguments on both sides for the development, and I can certainly see why the community is opposed. But I think, in some respects, the community has made some concession. I don't think, based on conversation or based on review of the letters and their presentation, that they are opposed to North Side. I don't think they're opposed to medical office. And I think that they're just looking for whatever site is being proposed to comport with the level of expectations that are there with the future land use of the site. And I don't think that's unreasonable for them to have that expectation. So literally before us is whether or not we are going to go beyond what that states to support this use, which is a contemplated use, even though it surpasses the level of scale and intensity that was that's considered under the future land use map, and that will be adjacent to not only higher density residential, but single family homes that are of less density. So those are all my thoughts, Chair. I can't necessarily say I've chosen a side yet, as I'm still weighing this, but again, just recognizing the issues on all sides.
Mr. Chairman, in light of Commissioner Cuba's comments, I'd like to add 2 additional items to my motion, if I could.
Sure.
Okay, the first one would be that it, so this would be number 11. This would be this use only. I hear her concerns about, and she's correct, that O&I zoning, if we zone this O&I without specifying that it's for this use only, we could run into the possibility of having something much more intense. And then the second one, which would be number 12, is to direct staff to bring an amendment to the specific area policy guidelines in January to address the transition on the west side of West Atlanta Road into the residential along Oakdale Road. That kind of addresses that area that I mentioned that's on the other side of the circle, but it's also the part that would be right up against the residential communities that you saw. So if the second's okay, I'd like to add those 2 things to my motion.
And I'll second that.
I do have a question. I'm sorry, another question and follow-up, and
Sure.
This is for Commissioner Otter zoning staff. In the staff analysis, it provided that the site did not meet the Atlanta Road design guidelines. And in your stipulations or conditions for the site, you provided that it is to comply with the design guidelines, not otherwise in conflict. Where, in what way is the current proposal in conflict with the design guidelines?
I'm not 100% certain on that, Commissioner Cupid, because I saw that last night myself, and that's one of the reasons why I put in the stipulation that the final elevations would have to be approved by the district commissioner, and I also put in there that they would have to meet the Atlanta design guidelines. And so I plan on working with staff to kind of make sure that those 2 things work out. And I think that by putting in there that the final elevations have to be approved by the district commissioner, that allows the county to have the final say.
Also a concern of the community is the architectural compatibility. But if you can address
and I believe
that,
that in the stipulation letter, it addresses the fact that the community is going to have some input also.
Okay.
Unless anybody else had any comments, the only thing I'd like to say is that, and I apologize to Led, I just don't remember your last name. But first of all, I found your presentation very professional, very informative, and I really appreciate the time you took in putting that together. I think everybody on the board and those out in the community know me by now. I always try to find middle ground. And what I would encourage is at the very end of her presentation, she had some ideas in there that I thought could Northside could look at to see if they could meet some of those requirements or requests. They seem very reasonable to me. I realize that not every one of them can be met, but I would encourage Commissioner Ott and Northside to sit down with, continue these discussions with Alette, because what she did, which is really great, she provided solutions, suggestions to how we can get to a common understanding. And I would really encourage Commissioner Ott and Northside to work with Alette and her homeowners association and her group to see if they could adopt as many of those suggestions as possible. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. I can see all of you this time, so please raise your hand. I see all 4 hands on the screen, so it passes 5-0. Thank you very much, commissioners. With that, let's take a break until 11:15, all right? Okay, John, we got everybody back? Okay, I believe we're doing Z32 now, right?
Correct, sir. Okay, presenting case Z32 2020 NTI Acquisitions LLC. President RRC for multifamily residential dwelling units in land 1013 of the 17th district. Property is located on the southwest side of Cumberland Boulevard, north and east of Oakton Park Drive, and northeast of I-75. The applicant is present, and there is no one here in person opposing this case. There is no one virtually opposing this case. I'm going to ask Mr. Sams to come to the front and make his presentation.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman.
Morning again, Mr. Sams.
For the record, my name is Garvis Sams, I belong from Sams Larkin in Marietta, and I've got the pleasure of representing NGI, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Nevada Group here in the Atlanta area. And I have with me a veritable plethora of experts, and I don't say that in a flippant way. We've got Jim Borders, who of course is the main principal at NGI. We've got also with us Mr. Jim Smith of Niles Bolton, who of course is our architect, and we've got Mr. John Walker of Kimley Horn, who is here. Those are representatives of an incredible team that my client's been able to assemble, so they're all here to answer any questions you may have. The first image that is showing, at least on the screen I'm looking at, is the perfect image to start with. This is an exhibit that we prepared, and what this shows you is the overall Hines Overton mixed-use development. If you start at the top, you see, or the north, there's an office that has presently had its ground's been broken, it's under construction. You have an existing, excuse me, that was the office. The hotel is the one that's currently under construction. Then you have existing residential as you move in a southerly direction, which is Overton Rise subdivision, which is a multifamily community of luxury homes. Then you see the site below that, which is the subject property, a little over 4 acres, which is the site under consideration today in terms of the development that NGI proposes. And then existing office and a hotel. There are retail components interspersed into the office areas as well. The property itself consists of, as I mentioned, a 4.29 acre tract of land. Still looking at this exhibit, you can see that it is located just north of Cumberland Parkway. It's in a situation where it is blessed by being within a neighborhood activity, a regional activity center of the future land use map, which is your most intense activity center, and close, as you can see, to the Cumberland core if you go in a westerly direction across I-75 from that. It's also in the county's CID, Community Improvement District, for the Cumberland Galleria area, and enjoys, or rather he's burdened with, or will be, the taxes that are a part of that, but nevertheless self-imposed taxes by members of the CID. So it's in an area where you expect this type of development. And as we see this is a completion of Hines Overton, which actually began back in and was approved by the board on March 18th, 2008. Interestingly enough, it was zoned RRC at the time, or rather unused but new type classification that we utilized for the mixed-use development. It was zoned in 2008. I'll have to say they were visionaries in terms of what they knew was ultimately going to happen, not only with I-75 corridor, but this section of the Cumberland Galleria area, or the Cumberland core, as some people would say. 4 years later, after that original entitlement in 2008, Overton Rise that you see is the northernmost residential of that, which is a multifamily development, was built by Newport and Krauss and his company, and is fully occupied, very well used, very well liked. And it's been from the beginning in our talks with the Planning Commission, one of the things that they wanted to replicate in terms of what it offered in terms of aesthetics, landscaping, like what we've done. We've gone one step beyond that, as I'll get to in just a minute with some of our stipulations and our conditions. During the pendency of this application, we worked steadily with your staff. We worked steadily with Mr. Waybright of the Planning Commission. We have received staff's recommendation for approval in its totality. In fact, when this first came to bat for the Planning Commission a couple of months ago, it was on a consent agenda. I pulled this simply because we wanted to make some changes to conditions, particularly architectural style and composition. If we can move to that particular slide that shows the architectural style and composition of the buildings that are proposed to be built on that. There we go. This is the latest architectural style and composition that we have submitted, and you can see what we have are not only multifamily, luxury, highly amenitized Class A homes, apartment homes, but we also have, and you can see where they're situated, two-story townhomes that are a part of this. We started out with just a pure multifamily development. In meeting with the commissioner, he said, think outside the box. This needs to be more. This is a critical positioning for this piece of property in this location. So think outside the box. We did. We added a townhome component to it, as you see reflected on this particular exhibit that's being shown on your monitors. But we didn't go quite a step far enough. So we have increased the townhome presence in this. So we've got a total number of 23 townhomes, and of course the balance of the multifamily right at 325 units. Again, following your staff's recommendation for that, or for this. We've talked to the Powers Ferry Corridor Alliance. I know this isn't a peripheral part of their geographic jurisdiction, but nevertheless, we thought it important to talk with them. We did that early. We did it often until finally they have said we're fine. If we want to weigh in, we'll weigh in. We spoke with Ron Siphon, and I say this in the kindest of way, a perennial activist in the Vinings area, and provided him with a comparative analysis between this and Overton Rise, so he could see what Niles Bolton had done with respect to both comparatively, and that was helpful to the Planning Commission to be able to compare the two multifamily developments as well, and he was appreciative. I guess the point I'm driving to, there is no opposition to this. There's no opposition from the school board. There's no opposition from the public. There's no opposition from the CID. There's no opposition from the Powers Ferry Corridor Alliance. The businesses that are in the area, we've received no opposition from them. It just seems to meet all the dictates of policy that Mr. Chairman, you and Commissioner Ott and the board have exemplified over the past almost 20 years that Hines Overton has been under development. We have several stipulation letters, and they've all been provided to you and your staff. The most recent of which changed the site plan to include the additional townhome components, or the additional townhome units as a part of the townhome component, and also provided a revised site plan, if I could get Cornelius or someone with IT to get us to the site plan. Now, of course, there's a black and white site plan that we're submitting, but this is the conceptual plan right here. You see in sort of an orange color. What this helps depict is the positioning of the structured parking. It's a wrap type circumstances you might suspect for this site. Very similar to the balance of Hines Overton in terms of how the parking is accessed and how it's utilized. We've actually done a specific parking plan for this, submitted it on May 29th. We did a full traffic impact study by Kimley Horn, John Walker, and of course the people there at Kimley Horn, including Emmy Montagna and Zach Randolph as well. But you see the parking, it's in the gray to your left, if you will. Everything you see in orange depicts the courtyards in the middle, Of course, the pool area, detention, this thing was master planned for detention back in 2008, revised in 2012. So the calculations are there for detention. It's going to be underground. There may be a component of it, which is above, but that will go with the enhanced landscaping that we have for the site. So you can see its orientation towards 75, and then looking at this going to the south, you can see the fact that this is also oriented toward Cumberland Parkway, but there is no point of ingress and egress on Cumberland Parkway except for an emergency decel lane with mountable curb for fire safety and fire apparatus purposes. So if you want to go back to the site before this one, Cornelius, and I guess going before this one. Very good. What this depicts, the dark red or maroon color is Regional Activity Center. Again, I mentioned that. We're on the periphery of it, but nevertheless, subject to the strictures of that in terms of content. So also, when you have a Regional Activity Center, you also have sub-areas within which properties are situated. This is within a sub-area which obviously allows retail, office, and multifamily. The best of the retail on the site was gobbled up by Mr. Fuqua and the Battery, the Braves, and kudos to them. This is a tertiary site in terms of retail. Office inventory is simply not something that is interesting to Hines Overton. They've got that significant office component. In fact, one of our premier clients, Jamestown, is housed there as well. The breakdown of this, if you're interested, and many people are, and maybe the reason the school board is not in attendance or not opposing this, is there's 30 studio units, it's 9%, 151 bedroom units, which is 46%. I think my time is run out, so let me wrap up. You can refer to the STIP letter to see the breakdown, but it'll show you why the school board has no opposition. Lastly speaking, if you view this in the totality, you could go for the buildings. This looks just like a mixed-use development, which is what it is. The new residential building we'll build looks just like the continuation of the mixed-use development. So with your staff's recommendation for approval, your planning commission, with there being no opposition, we do respectfully request that you approve this as presented today, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Otten. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sams. Okay, Commissioner Otten.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cornelius, if you could go to, I think there were a couple more slides on Garvis's presentation that showed the building elevations. Yeah, there we go. Just so before I start talking a little bit about making the motion, I want to commend Niles Bolton and Garvis's clients. They've made some significant changes to the elevations to kind of bring it more into what I thought it should be in the area. I think there might be one more slide, Cornelius, or is that it? One of the things, and it's not in these slides, those of you that driven up 75 and have seen the parking deck on one of the other complexes that's in this Overton Park, you know that it's just this rows of concrete lanes. And this development, they've done a tremendous job of incorporating what you're seeing in these slides into the parking deck side so that it doesn't necessarily look like a parking deck. And so I really appreciate that. I find it interesting today, and this one will not be as long as the last one, but it seems like we're going memories of District 2, and you know, you're getting a chance to see the vision that Commissioner Jolie Thompson had for the district when he was the commissioner for 16 years. You saw what he did down on Atlanta Road, and you now have heard about the Overton complex and how the board back then in 2008 kind of set up what they thought that this entire area would be. This is the final piece that is not developed in the Overton area. I just have a couple questions for staff before I make the motion. Is somebody here from the water system?
Yes. This is Tim Davidson. Can you hear me?
Hey, Tim. I noticed in Garvis's letter there's some discussion about allowing the building to be within 7 feet of a sewer easement instead of the normal 10. Are you okay with that?
No, actually, I discussed that with the director of the water system, and she wants that 10-foot setback as called for in the code.
Okay. All right. So I'll address that. Now, is that in the stormwater comments? If I say all stormwater comments, that'll cover your objection to the 7 feet?
Well, not stormwater, but it's in my comments, the water and sewer comments.
Yeah, okay, the water,
it is
right,
in there.
okay. All right, so, all right, I'll make sure that I address that. And Amy, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, there was also some discussion in Garvis's stipulation letter about some DOT issues. Have you had a chance to read his stip letter? It's the one from May 12th.
Yes, I have read that one.
Do you have any issues with any of the stuff that's in there?
No outstanding issues. I think we've got it all resolved.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, Mr. Chairman, I want to make a motion. I'm going to try to address Tim's concerns with sewer, but I'll make it up front for the clerks that the water and sewer comments need to be consistent with what the code is, because I know the stip letter has some changes. So I'll make a motion to approve Z32 to the RRC zoning category with the following stipulations. The letter from Garvis Sams dated May 12, 2020, except change item number 3 to read where it says after the 325 residential units, 23 of which will be townhomes. Item number 4, change to read after revised renderings which were submitted on July 16, 2020. Number 2 is a maximum of 325 units consisting of 23 townhomes and 321 apartments with a mix of 30 studio, 151 bedroom, 111 2 bedroom, and 16 3 bedroom. And as a side note, as Garvis said, part of the reason you haven't seen the school system show up is because severely limit the number of 3 bedrooms. Number 3, all zoning division recommendations with the following changes. Number 1, okay, so the current letter is May 12th. So change the date to read May 12, 2020. Number 6, change to read from 600 spaces to 508 parking spaces. Number 4, final site plan to be approved by the district commissioner. Number 5, final elevations to be approved by the district commissioner. Number 6, final landscape plan to be approved by the district commissioner. Number 7, all planning commission comments except number 5, which is to change to read 508 parking spaces. Number 8, all fire department comments and recommendations not otherwise in conflict. All stormwater comments and recommendations not otherwise in conflict. All water and sewer comments and recommendations. And as I noted, they are going to have to address the 7 feet versus 10 feet. So I'll add to that on the all water and sewer comments and recommendations that the elements in Garvis Sam's letter referencing reducing the 10 foot to 7 feet are removed. And then the last one is all DOT comments and recommendations. And just a comment, Mr. Chairman, before you call the vote. I was initially opposed to this, and I just want to commend the applicant and their associates in working with me to get this to where I thought it was a better project. So that's my motion.
Okay, I'll second it. Comments from the board? I don't see any hands. The only question I have is Commissioner Ott is Mr. Garvis submitted a letter on June 26, 2020. And looking through it, I believe all your comments covered all the agreements that you had made with him and yourself. I just want to make sure that you're comfortable.
Yeah, well, let's add on my number 1 where I said letter from Garvis Sam dated May 12th. Let's add the letter you referenced also.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure.
The biggest thing, Mr. Chairman, I think that needs to be emphasized here is that there are a couple of references to the sewer line. There's county normally requires the building to be 10 feet away, and I just want to make sure that it's very clear that our vote, if it's approved, does not authorize the reduction from 10 to 7. That they're going to have to work on that with water.
Okay, all right. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. And it passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, I believe we're on to what? Lot 6 next?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm on a roll here.
6 of 2020, Timmy Frank Spinazzo requests a temporary land use permit to allow more adults and vehicles within the landlot 16 of the 19th district. Property is located on the south side of Big Oaks Drive, south of Old Dallas Road. This was continued from last month, and there is one person virtually who would like to speak in opposition to this. Fun and see if the applicant is here. The applicant is present, Mr. Chairman, and there is one person virtually who will speak after the applicant.
Okay, so do we have, she's here to speak in support. Is there anyone here that speaks in opposition here or virtually?
There's no one here in person to speak in opposition. There is one person virtually who wants to speak in opposition.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was clear about that. All right, we're ready.
I'll show you the honor.
Okay. Thank you. Make sure you speak loud. Okay. Okay, thank you. Can everybody hear me well? Okay. Good afternoon, good morning, and thank you for your time today. My name is Tammy Frank Spinazzo, and I am here for a temporary land use permit to allow for unrelated adults to live in a home. I just want to give you a little background about how we got here. My son Matt, he lives in the home, 2615 Big Oaks Drive. Matt is during his last year of high school, he earned 4 welding certificates, went to school from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And he qualified for a scholarship, didn't really want to go to college at the time, he wanted to be a welder. He works full-time at a local fabrication shop, and he attends school at night. So he is a sun down kind of guy. He really wanted the opportunity to be independent, and I want to support that as a young man with such drive and ambition. So I gave him the opportunity to live in my home that I own at 2615 Big Oaks Drive. When I did that, he had some friends that wanted to come live with him, and I agreed because they were all responsible young men and young men that he has known since he's been in middle school. And at the time, I did not understand or was not aware that that was not in compliance with the zoning for the land. It's not an excuse. I take full responsibility for that. I just want to just share that with you. I have completely educated myself as far as what's allowed and what isn't, and we'll ensure that there are no additional violations in this home. Since this issue came up, we have had no additional complaints or compliance issues. The boys have done well in the home, and that's why I decided to go ahead and pursue the temporary land use permit for them to allow them to remain in the home. The home has 1,922 square feet. It's a split level home. Although it has 4 bedrooms and 2 baths, 1,322 is SFLA and 600 is SDLA. But the 600 is all above ground. It's not a basement. There is parking for 4 vehicles compliant with county ordinance. There's a 2-car garage, a carport, for 2 vehicles, and a paved driveway in which we utilize. So I'm not asking for permission to park 4 vehicles on the driveway. I want to make that clear because that is not what the description says. And I also have received approval from the Cobb County Health Department for the septic tank and so on. The young men that live in the home are responsible adults learning life skills. They all are independent. They work full-time. Their preference is, of course, to live in a house and not live in an apartment or any area where there's a lot of people this particular time, especially now with the virus. They are all very well adjusted. They share responsibilities in the home, and not only financially, but also tasks. They're learning all their life skills there. And, you know, and another reason why, too, it's affordable for them because they just basically pay the bills in the house, and they're all able to work and live and get by without any exorbitant amount of rent.
And also too, the single home is also a safer place for them than being in an apartment building. They're able to safely quarantine. They have not exposed themselves, and nor have they been exposed to crime or any of the social activities that complexes do what brings young people. They're all of excellent character and integrity. They're a positive influence on the neighborhood. They are vigilant. They've reported suspicious activity in the neighborhood. They've helped out some of the neighbors, fixing things and moving some things. They're not a disturbance. I keep close watch on them. I live just a few miles away. The home is well maintained. And again, I'm very involved in presence. They have house rules, clear understanding that it's a residential neighborhood. It needs to be respected. And I did purchase that home in 2017 because I do believe the potential of the neighborhood. And I would not do anything intentionally to jeopardize that. I want the neighborhood to be uplifted and not brought down. I have sent a consent or contiguous occupancy by certified letter to the 3 neighbors who do have a border property to my property, and I have not received one back. Just in closing, on June 2nd, the Planning Commission said that they could not support my application to allow foreign-related adults to reside in the house. However, they said that they would recommend that the tenants have 90 days to find housing, which I am very grateful for under these circumstances. And if you find yourself in agreement with the Planning Commission not to approve my application, I am asking you specifically to please give further consideration to approve that they at least remain in the house until May 2021. And the reason I asked you for this is because the tenants do have a transition plan for that time. Transition into additional new housing at this time is very difficult. Aside from the shortage in the area of affordable and decent housing, apartment living is very risky at this time, especially for young people. They naively gravitate towards socializing, which further incurs spread of virus. And these boys really, they don't do that. They keep to themselves, which has been good in home. And then also too, it would be a financial hardship for me at this time. My job, I work in the travel industry. My job has been impacted as a result of COVID-19. So I would be very grateful for this consideration if we were able to just get approval to keep them there through May 2021. I want to thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate your time this morning.
Mr. Chairman, Board, there is one person who came in here in person, proposed in person. So we're going to hear from that person first, then the person virtually right here.
Okay, fine.
Good morning. My name is Randall Bedgood. Okay. All right. My name is Randall Bedgood, and I live at 2587 Twin Oaks Drive, this neighborhood. And I'm not going to give a long presentation. It's not any use to just keep beating this thing. I'm opposed to this item, this agenda item. Neighborhood. You should not let an absentee property owner come in and operate a boarding house and rent rooms for profit, which is exactly what's going on. I ask that you uphold your ordinance and deny this item. And I hope you don't extend this to May of 2021. That's a little bit long. We already had an extension since May. You could have heard this in May because of the circumstances it wasn't heard. But I don't think we need to extend it any further. I'm not the one that complained to code enforcement about this. I don't think that should be clear. I've lived in the neighborhood since 1979. The neighborhood has gone through some transition. Got a lot of rental property in the neighborhood because it is a nice neighborhood. People live there, keep it up, and the only way you can keep it up is to go to code, go to code enforcement. Code enforcement is our only avenue to correct problems in our neighborhood. Like I said, I'm not the one that called this in code. The reason why I'm up here speaking today, you got several emails, residents in the area on that street and on the other street. There's almost 2 streets in this subdivision. They're both dead end. Like I said, emails from other people. The people wanted to come in today. I told them not to. It's like pulling fingernails. Be up here in this situation. I know it's a difficult situation. Y'all are having to go through to do these presentations. It's a pain to sit here through this. So I just asked them, if they didn't, but I don't think it would do any good. More people show up. If you write an email, that would be sufficient. I don't work. I'm retired, so I can sit here all day where a lot of people can. Anyway, I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Opposition is Debbie Bedgood, and we unmute Debbie Bedgood. Debbie, you can go ahead and speak now, please.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Debbie Bedgood. I am a 40-plus year resident of Big Oaks, and I really don't feel that a boarding house is the best use for this neighborhood. It is a single-family residential neighborhood, and because of it being 40-plus years old, we don't have a homeowners association to help us out, so we kind of have to depend on code enforcement to keep our small neighborhood compliant. And I would just ask that you follow the planning recommendation and deny this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. All right, so I believe that covers all the speakers. So I'll turn this over to Commissioner Gamble.
Thank you, Chairman. As our speaker said, there has been opposition, and this was a result of a code enforcement violation. So with that, I would like to make the motion to deny the application. However, I would like to give the applicant to the end of the year, December 31st of 2020, to come into compliance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. And it passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, I believe the next item are other business items. Is that correct, John?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. The first item on today's other business agenda is to consider other business item number 12 of 2020. The purpose of this request is to consider a gated community for Mr. Abbas Haderi regarding property located on the southeast side of Paper Mill Road, east of Place, 5, 6, and 74 the first street. By way of background, Mr. Chairman, Board, the subject property is zoned R20, and the applicant would like to make this a gated community subject to Cobb County Development Standard number 424. The applicant has submitted a site plan in which all the lots meet the R20 minimum lot size and setbacks. The impervious surface was originally averaged over all the lots in subdivision, but the plan has changed. Now all the lots meet the 35% impervious on a lot-by-lot basis. The applicant has submitted some letters detailing their proposal, demonstrating that they are meeting the legal requirements for the gated community development standard. The road and the detention pond will be owned and maintained by the homeowners association. The applicant has submitted a couple of letters for the agreement conditions, which the board has received via email and which are in this information packet. The applicant is present, Mr. Chairman Board, and there are 2 people here in person opposing this application. Yolanda, is there anyone virtually opposed? There is no one here virtually opposing this application. So at this point, I would ask the Board of Commissioners to conduct a public hearing and consider the proposed proposal for a gated community. And the applicant is here, would like to make a few comments.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Again, for the record, my name is Garvin Sams, the law firm of Sams, Larkin Huff. Mr. Peterson did a good job of setting this up as he always does with other business applications. I do represent, in this case, both the property owner and also the applicants. And the applicant, Mr. Abasadari, is an engineer. He's here with me today. Should you have any specific engineering questions, he can certainly respond to those. This is a little different than most of the way that cases are handled in two fashions, two broad fashions. Number one, you don't really hear many gated community requests. In fact, this is the only gated community request that has come before the board in over a decade. Now you get them a lot of times in the context with a rezoning, or in the context of a mixed-use development, or in the context perhaps of a settlement of litigation. But there's only been one other application that has filed for a gated community approval, and that was a subdivision called Stone Hall that Mr. Presley did about a decade ago off of Roswell Road. And that was approved, and that was the prototype of the template with which Mr. Peterson went forward in terms of handling this. The property at issue, you've got a packet of information before you, and of course you've got your zoning analysis and staff recommendations. This is a 3.36 acre tract of land that is located on Paper Mill Road, just east of Gateside Place, which is a subdivision that is zoned R15. The totality of our property is zoned, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Ott, R20. There was an attempt a year ago where we came in for a rezoning to try to gain 7 lots for this, but it was clear that we were just a skosh over the 2.0 unit per acre requirements in terms of the future land use map. So we withdrew that application. We wanted to rethink the process, and without having to go through a rezoning, staff and I and my client and engineer sat down and determined the best way really to approach this would be to jettison the R30 piece, which is about 5,000 square feet of R30 on Paper Mill. When I say jettison, I mean convey it. It ultimately became part of the transaction with our next door neighbor, who surrounds us on 2 sides, in terms of us being able to secure off-site easements. And it's a concurrent easement for both water and sewer. We had to have those. We approached one of the neighbors that's here today in opposition, and he said, well, I don't really want to grant that, but if you want to buy my house, I'll grant the easement for you. But we were able to work with a neighbor that the terms were certainly more amenable, at least in terms of being able to accomplish securing that. Now, the other thing about other business applications that have been heard or considered, I can't go over the totality of the case and present it to you again. We're hampered or hamstrung, whatever word you want to use. But then again, that's a good point. Let me tell you what we've done since we were last before you. First of all, you're looking now on your monitors at the a site plan which shows the positioning of the buildings, and of course the detention facility, which is at the southernmost point of that. One of the most critical issues coming out of last month's hearing was the fact that detention was not only there, but it was considered to be close to the property line. So we have moved it so it's now 32 feet from the property line, and the neighbor, which seemed to be offended by it, his house is a substantial relief from that 32 feet. At the last hearing, the neighbor stated that there's going to be a wall 18 to 20 feet in height for the detention facility. I guess based upon his understanding of the contours of the topo as you go down towards the bottom of the site, but in point of fact, the wall, which is going to be a form-fill wall built to the county's stormwater design protocols, is a maximum of 5 feet in height above ground. If I could get Cornelius to go to the engineering documentation that we filed with our last letter, that of course right there is the entrance signage and the landscaping on Powers Ferry. These are the letters that we filed. If you keep going, Cornelius, you're going to get to the There we go, right there. This is the first page of the fully engineered detention facility by Mr. Hadari's engineering company, ACR Engineering. So if you can go to the next on that, here you see the site plan itself and the positioning of the contours, and then also the way the detention has been looked at in terms of that 5-foot wall. And as that wall incrementally moves towards the interior of the subdivision, it gets less and less the further it gets away from the deepest part of the detention. If you can scroll up, Cornelius, to the next slide. Here, this again shows, of course, the contours, the topography, and then it also shows the relocation, reconfiguration of the detention pond and the landscaping that has been added to that. And the detention pond itself is going to have the four-liner wall with a masonry component on the exterior of it, so it won't be seen. I mean, it's a 5-foot wall. It's yes, I'm a little over 5 feet, but just consider it as high as any fence or any wall that you would typically see on anyone's property. It's not ominous, it's not overpowering, and it's certainly not objectionable from an aesthetic perspective. Plus, when you add that to the landscaping that you now see around that pond, which will be maintained, owned, and taken care of by the homeowners, the mandatory HOA, then you can see why it becomes not only palatable, but certainly acceptable. And obviously, this portion of the property, even though we've moved it further toward paper mill and reconfigured it, this is the only place on site where detention can actually be located. You can scroll up to the next slide. Again, a part of the engineering documents, what this is, and I know it's very technical in nature, but you can see the various components of the detention wall and how not only it'll be built, how it will be constructed, not only the methodology and the protocols, but the composition of the wall as well. If you go to the next slide up, what you're going to see here are the elevations in terms of the pond itself. If you look at the very top of the exhibit, you can see the depth of the pond. And if you look at the other temperature profiles that are below that, you can see the positioning of the wall itself. Again, not 18 feet, not 20 feet. It's a 5-foot wall. There's a memo attached to that. That memo simply states that they're following the strictures set forth by the Stormwater Management Division. After last month's meeting wherein this was held in order to answer Commissioner Ott's questions, we met with Mr. Braden, the Stormwater Management Director, and our engineers, and followed their instructions to come with these site plans. And if you can scroll up again. This is the most recent letter that we sent. And both of these are successive letters. One's on June the 14th. The other one is on June the 16th. Our operative STIP letter is March the 12th, and a revised site plan on June the 8th. But what this letter, this is the last link in the chain that was sent last Thursday to John Peterson, and of course distributed to everyone who's on my CC list. But what we did with this final letter is fully and finally address all the components that the commissioner brought up. Number one, a concern about the R20 district in terms of its setback requirements from Paper Mill Road. It was important for the commissioner to follow the code on this, as opposed to Stone Hall, which has a 10-foot front setback, but it didn't follow the strictures of R20. But with this gated community, in every respect, we will in terms of the setback that you see articulated there. And also, if you look at number 2 on what is being shown on the screen, you can see that the district commissioner gets another bite at the apple on everything. The landscape plans, the site plan, which we show the 40-foot setback from Paper Mill, and the other components, any and everything that's a part of it. And I'll tell you, your gated community ordinance it's the most comprehensive gated community ordinance I've seen in the 11 jurisdictions within which I work. So kudos to you on that. And we're agreeable to staff's recommendation for approval. And we do ask that, since this meets the future land use map dictates in terms of compliance with all aspects of R20, that you approve it as well. Mr. Chairman, thank you, Commissioner Ott. If anyone on the board has any questions, I'll be pleased to respond at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sams.
Thanks, sir.
All right, I believe those in opposition now.
A total of 10 minutes. A total of 10 minutes. I don't know about.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Fred Walker. I'm here again before you today relative to the application OB12. I currently reside at 4615 Gateside Lane, which is located adjacent to the southern border of the subject property. That is my property right there, correct. So I want to state first and foremost that myself and the rest of the subdivision that has sort of appointed me as their spokesperson, as well as the other neighbors whose property adjoins this property, we don't oppose a subdivision. We don't oppose a gate. What we do oppose is we oppose the attempt to use this process to modify things that R20 zoning would require on this property. I'm pleased to hear Mr. Sams say that he has now reworked this site plan so that a 40-foot setback from Paper Mill Road will be included. The important thing to know about that is we haven't seen that. And to the extent that this property is going to be 15 feet further from Paper Mill Road, the lot sizes are so close to 20,000 feet, I don't know that they're going to be able to fit the number of lots on this property that they're still asking for. And until there's a plan that shows this, I think it's premature to make any decisions on it. The next issue related to impervious coverage. I'm happy to hear again that that issue appears to be resolved in that the impervious requirement is going to be allocated on a per lot basis and is not going to be able to be averaged across the subdivision. I do still have a question about an issue that was raised at the last meeting and still has yet to be answered today. I did hear Mr. Sams use the term jettison with respect to the R30 portion of the property that is at the northeast corner of the subject property. Interesting, because I felt the same way. I felt they jettisoned off this piece of property in an attempt to make sure that their application before the board was all R20 property. That's all fine and good, but Mr. Sams's comments and his letters have consistently said that there is going to be a wall across the property line along Paper Mill Road. No drawing that we have seen to date shows a wall. And the question then becomes, where does the wall go as the property leaves Paper Mill Road? Does the wall include the sliver that was jettisoned so that the property is within the wall? Does the wall go on the south side of the jettison property so that it now becomes a no man's land? Mr. Sams said something about the property being exchanged with an adjacent neighbor related to an easement. That property was not deeded to the adjacent neighbor. That property was deeded to the real estate agent. We don't want to see that property left as an undeveloped, essentially trash pit, for lack of a better term. And we still haven't seen this wall. We have no idea where the wall is. We don't know if it's going to be including the triangle, not including the triangle. With regard to the detention facility, again, I'm pleased to see the changes that have been made with respect to the detention facility. At the last meeting, Commissioner Ott, your motion was to hold this meeting over today for Mr. Sams to address the Paper Mill Road setbacks to meet code, set up each lot to meet the impervious requirement, and to provide clarification on the maintenance and non-disturbance of the 20-foot landscape buffer for the people that buy these homes. We've seen or heard information about the setbacks and the impervious requirement, although we still have not seen a plan showing a 40-foot setback from Paper Mill Road. Obviously, Mr. Sams appears before this board regularly and knows the ins and outs better than I or my neighbors or your average homeowner. And maybe he knows that he can just ignore the neighbors and still get what he wants for his client. And if that's the truth, and I hope it isn't, this whole process would be a sham, and that would really be a shame. Why does this matter? It matters because trust is something that is not plentiful here. We haven't been brought in to have discussions about this since his attempt at rezoning the property last year. Not one single time. The letters that Mr. Sams says that he has copied me on, he has not. 2 in the last 2 weeks. And I'm not the only person that wasn't copied on these letters. With the many of the provisions in the stipulation letter that allow for modification based upon the district commissioner's approval, we have serious concerns about how much of what is being, quote unquote, offered in the stipulation letters will remain in the final development of the subdivision. My concern is not with the district commissioner, and it probably will be that this property will be developed long after Mr. Ott remains as the district commissioner. But my concern is with the ability of the applicant to offer something that they're not actually obligated to perform. The stipulations and comments by Mr. Sams call for a 20-foot heavily landscaped buffer, but the drawings only show 18 red maples along the shared property line with column gate. Some of his letters talk about a 30-foot rear setback. Some of them talk about a 35-foot rear setback. The rear setback is supposed to be 35 feet. The stipulations and comments by Mr. Sams call for a wall along Paper Mill Road, but it doesn't appear in a single drawing. And we still have the mysterious issue of the sliver that was jettisoned off to the real estate agent. And we have letters upon letters that say that the stipulations from this letter is amended by this letter. How about one final list of what we're talking about and final drawings? Is that too much to ask before making a decision? What happens when the applicant or the subsequent builder decides that a 20-foot landscape buffer, it's just too expensive? He then goes to the district commissioner and says, I'd like to do a 7-foot landscape buffer. 20 feet is just too costly. And all of that happens outside the public's knowledge or opportunity to be heard. It seems to defy the entire purpose of having public hearings and transparency in government. If you approve the applicant's request, allowing for all of the subdivisions to be modified, the applicant irrevocably got exactly what they wanted, and the community received nothing more than a maybe. However, if the board gets further clarification resolutions of the issues that I've raised, and the board is at a point where they consider approving the application, I would request that any approval be preliminary only, subject to confirmation that the actual plan matches the stipulations that have been offered. Or I would ask that any request for modification to the district commissioner also be subject to the approval of the Column Gate Homeowners Association. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. How much time do we have left?
Mr. Chairman, the time has expired.
Okay, all right. So what's your recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, board, the staff would recommend the Board of Commissioners approve the request, subject to the letters of agreeable conditions from Mr. Garber Sams Jr. dated March 12, 2020, June 8, 2020, July 14, 2020, and July 16th, 2020. District Commissioner to approve the final plan, and Cobb DOT comments, stormwater management comments, and fire department comments.
Okay. Commissioner Ott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the opposition read my notes, so you'll hear a little bit of rehashing. But let me look at it. Let's talk about it from kind of like the macro level here. I think the problem, and it's not Mr. Sam's or the applicant's fault, is the fact that we have this gated community code. And unfortunately, the way it's written, it allowed this to come forward the way it did, which, as we saw in the last meeting, had a lot of loose ends and unaddressed issues. And in essence, was an attempt to kind of do the things that we normally do in a zoning hearing under a rezoning request, but under this gated community code. So the first order that I would like to do is have a clerk's note and just let community development know. But I think that there needs to be a rewrite and address the gated community code to kind of address some of the things that we've seen here with this request. That's the first thing. The opposition is exactly correct. We have 3 letters, June 8th, July 14th, July 16th. I was confused as to what I was looking at and where we're at. I mean, I appreciate Garvis responding to my text messages last night. I know he had his zoning hearing in Smyrna, and even this morning. And I'm not really sure exactly where we are because, as the opposition mentioned, we have 3 different levels and one references the other and back and forth. And so I think there's a lot of confusion there. But the number one issue I have, in the July 14th letter, there is a site plan, which looks remarkably similar to the letter or to the site plan that's in the June 6th or June 8th letter, with the exception that the kind of shape of the detention pond is a little bit different, and the house renditions are removed. But when I look at, and admittedly this is online, but when I look at the setback lines, the property lines, they look exactly the same as the June 8th letter. Now, as the board knows, one of the big issues that was discussed last month was the fact that this needed to have the 40-foot setbacks along Paper Mill Road because that's their front setback. I don't see that on the site plans that are available to me that this has been shown as to how it's been addressed. I think the opposition makes a very valid point when you have lots that are very close to the R20 dimensions, and we're going to increase the setback along Paper Mill Road by 15 feet. And at the same time, we're going to take the detention pond on the opposite side and move it away from the neighbor's house. We're squeezing the development, and I just don't know how that's going to happen and still maintain 20,000 square foot lots without a variance. So I think that those are some issues. Also, there is the issue about the wall. I mean, in every other zoning that I look at, I've seen renditions of the wall. I've seen how things are going to look along Paper Mill. You know, it's a very, it's a narrow road, but at the same time, there are some very expensive homes on Paper Mill Road, and I don't think that something that's substandard or doesn't meet the neighborhood should be allowed in there. So bottom line, Mr. Chairman, is the fact that there are still a lot of unanswered questions and unaddressed issues. I mean, I do appreciate the fact that the applicant addressed the issues, some of the issues that I brought up last month. But, you know, this is kind of like an onion. And as we peel the layers back, we continue to find more things that haven't been addressed or raise more questions. And so with that, I'm going to make a motion to hold this other business item until the August zoning hearing, and direct the applicant that I would like a single letter with all the stipulations, a revised site plan that shows how the lots are going to fit, with the front setback being 40 feet, the detention pond being moved as they proposed. I would also like to see a landscape plan. I would like to see how the wall is going to fit on Paper Mill Road. And as you can see, Mr. Chairman, these are not things that are normally required under the gated community code. But we've seen the failings of this code, and so it kind of requires me to put these things into, you know, be required before we can decide what's going to happen here. So that would be my motion.
Okay, I'll second it. Comments from the board? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, I believe the next one is OB 32. Is that correct, John?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
The business item number 32 of 2020 is to consider a site plan and stipulation amendment. James Hedges regarding rezoning application B160 of 1999. Property located on the southwesterly side of Maxon Marsh Drive and on the northeasterly side of Rag Road in R77 of the 19th District. By way of background, the property was rezoned site plan specific to R20OC 1999 as a residential subdivision. The applicant would like to amend stipulations regarding the 30-foot undisturbed buffer along Wright Road, stipulation number 8, elected September 22nd, 2000. The applicant purchased this property March 13, 2019, while unaware of the undisturbed buffer stipulation. The applicant installed a fence in the backyard that approaches to the 30-foot undisturbed buffer and may have removed some trees in the buffer area. This application is the result of a code enforcement complaint on March 10, 2020. The location of the fence is shown on the attached plan. If approved, all previous conditions should remain in effect. The applicant is present, Mr. Chairman of the Board, and there is one person virtually who wishes to oppose this case and will like to speak to you. The applicant is present. At this time, we would ask the Board of Commissioners to conduct a public hearing and consider the proposed site plan and stipulation amendment.
Okay, we're ready for those in support.
I'm Nicole Hedges. My husband James and I are here, and we do have a PowerPoint with pictures to show you. That can be pulled up. That would be great. Thank you guys so much for hearing our application for a variance on an undisturbed buffer where we've built a fence. We moved into our house in May of last year. At no point did we know that there was an undisturbed buffer, so we went into building this fence to look much like the rest of what we saw along our street and along our neighborhood. We live at 5613 Maxon Marsh Drive. And the back of our property does back up to Wright Road. Next slide, please. I'm going to show you some pictures first on the east side of Wright Road, which is the same area of Wright Road, the same side where our fence is. And these are pictures going along the backside of Stone Mill Creek neighborhood, which is where we live. There's a lot of different fences, different varieties of fences. The first set of pictures that we're going to look at do not include our fence. These are the neighboring properties in our neighborhood. We took all of the pictures of the fence on the same day, so they're all taken to show the same amount of trees or foliage that would be there. So these are some fences driving along the east side. I took them from the passenger seat of the car, so you can see there's quite a few fences along the street in these pictures that are not 30 feet back. They're also very visible with lack of tree cover. Next slide, please. These are some more fences going along that bottom, on the bottom right corner. That is the outside fence is a neighborhood fence. The fence behind it is a property fence. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. These are all just examples of other fences. The picture in the top right corner is actually standing or being taken from the edge of where our fence ends, looking at our next door neighbor's backyard, just to give you an idea of how much tree cover and grass and bush cover there is in a house that doesn't have a fence. That's our next door neighbor's house. Next slide, please. There's some other fences. The fence in the top right corner was built or worked on. I'm not sure if it was totally built or worked on recently. We saw the construction team. Obviously no cover on some of these fences. Next slide, please. We had some fallen trees. Our intention was never to remove any of our large trees. Like I said, we moved in May of 2019. There was a tree that had fallen on our house after a storm. It damaged the gutter and the plank on the back of the house. A second tree fell across Wright Road after a storm in December. The fire department police actually had to come out and clear the road from that. And we did have, in those fallen trees, several trees were damaged, so those trees were removed due to the damage or the trees having fallen. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the back of our house the week that we moved in. You can see the gutter has been damaged and there's a hole in the plank on the back. And the debris from the tree, that tree fell. Actually, that was there when we went to move in. That tree had just fallen and done the damage, and so we had to repair that. Next slide, please. This is just a copy of the fire department coming out to take away the other tree that fell off of our property across the Wright Road. We didn't hear the tree fall. We saw the fire truck in the backyard and went out, and one of our trees had actually fallen across the Wright Road. Those two were very large trees that broke substantial branches and tops off of other trees when they fell. Prior to building our fence, we had a land survey done with a professional surveyor and all of our property marked. We had all of our utilities marked. Everything was done with a professional company. We had to provide a very site-specific approval to our HOA. We gave everything to our HOA and we built exactly on the specifications that were provided, showing where our fence would be, where the back of the fence is along Wright Road. When we bought our house, there wasn't any mention of the buffer. I'm not sure at what point that gets disclosed anywhere. We talked to our realtor and our closing attorney after this violation came up, and they said it's not in any of our paperwork. We went through the paperwork. So we honestly had no idea that there was a buffer in that area, given that when we look along the neighborhood in Wright Road, there's fences on the majority of the back of the houses. We have a 6- and 7-year-old. They spend hours and hours in our backyard, especially with the virtual schooling and the social distancing that we've had to do. Having a backyard has been the only safe place for us to send them out to play and run. And so having our fence where it is has been really important to us. Next slide, please. These are pictures of our fence. The next set of pictures are all going to be our fence. The first ones were taken from standing on Wright Road. So all 4 of these pictures are looking at our fence. You can see the fence poking through in a couple of areas, but that there's a large amount of tree cover, bushes, and grass that cover the majority of our fence. These are more pictures of our fence. These are all looking at our fence from Wright Road. And again, these are more of our fence. The top right picture is looking from the corner of our fence up to our neighbor's yard. So you'll see that there's not a break in that tree cover between our house and our neighbor's house. The bottom left picture, you can still see some of the debris from where that tree fell across Wright Road. It was a large tree. It's pushed off to the side. The other pictures are driving on Wright Road, looking towards our fence. The top left picture is looking at our fence on the left. That is actually our property line. The bottom right picture is also looking where our fence is. You can see it's almost completely hidden by the trees. Our plan was never to remove all of the trees, but just to add a fence in the tree line. And we actually have been planting back trees and bushes for the ones that we did have to take down. And these are more pictures of our property. The bottom right picture is standing on our back porch, actually looking across our yard towards Wright Road from the back of our house. So you can see from the back porch, you can see the fence, but you also see there's quite a few large hardwoods, and there's a lot of tree cover, which is really important for lots of reasons, but especially having a nice shady backyard and privacy from Wright Road for our kids. In conclusion, our fence is not unique in our neighborhood. Many of the houses have fences that are along that buffer. We did not know of this requirement prior to fencing. We would actually not have bought our house if we had known about this requirement. Having 2 young kids to have a fenced yard for them to be able to run and play in was absolutely in our plans of looking for a house. The area around our fence is very wooded. As you saw in the pictures, we have more woods along our fence than most of the other fences in the area. We did have to take down some trees because of the trees falling and damaging other trees. We planted several new trees inside of our lot. We planted bushes inside of our lot and also on the outside of our fence. We've actually planted quite a few bushes and have plans to plant several more trees and bushes in that area. We actually would like a full screen between us and the road, help with noise and just privacy as cars going by. So thank you very much for your time. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation this morning. Okay, those in opposition?
We have 1 speaker virtually.
Okay.
Stephanie Tyler. Stephanie, you can unmute and you can speak now, please.
Okay, hi.
Good afternoon.
Chairman, members of the board, good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Talley, and I'm a homeowner in the area of Stone Mill Creek subdivision where this home variance is located. The 30-foot undisturbed buffer that is currently in place was agreed to after a hard-fought battle to stop a rezoning request from R30 to R20. Long story short, the developer took the county to court when a settlement was reached to rezone as R20 OSC. This allowed for green space to retain the natural beauty of the area. Initially, there were plans to have curbing and sidewalk along Wright Road. Instead, we opted for a 30-foot no-disturb buffer. It was put to us as a win-win situation. The developer did not have to spend, and the homeowners in the area could have our quality of life somewhat maintained. I understand that Mr. and Mrs. Hedges were not made aware of the 30-foot buffer by the previous homeowner. But as a homeowner, isn't it our responsibility to know what we own and what we are committed to do with it? The deed contains a section that describes the property. In this case, it indicates that the plat is in book 218 on page 15 and 16. Also, the HOA should have a description of each lot on file, which clearly states that the 30-foot that there's a 30-foot undisturbed buffer at the back of the property. I was able to find the deed in the plat without any issue using the tools provided online by the county. There are 6 homes along Wright Road. If you allow this variance, it sets a precedent for the other property owners who could also cut down trees, clear bushes, and put fences right next to the road. The HOA has already sold 0.63 acres of what was supposed to be dedicated green space along Poplar Springs Road, for a road to access a future subdivision in Paulding County. This change was approved without notice to the local area. It will cause at least a 25 or more foot path of green space to be mowed down. How much more loss of green space are we expected to allow? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, I believe that takes care of the comments from support and opposition. So, John, what's the staff's recommendation?
Mr. Chairman of the board, the staff would recommend that the board deny the request.
Sorry about that. Okay, John. And so, Commissioner Gambrill, I believe this is your case.
Yes, it is, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Mrs. Hedges, I have a question for you, please.
Ma'am.
Is your HOA ran by a group of homeowners, or do you have a management company doing it?
It's a property management company.
Okay, thank you. I drove out in this area the other day, and there are fences along Wright Road. However, these fences that have been erected sit outside of the 30-foot buffer. Also, Mrs. Hedges, I have the document that you signed upon closing that stated or referenced the attached final plat that also showed the 30-foot undisturbed buffer. Therefore, in my motion to deny, I would request that you have 60 days to move your just the back part of your fence to be outside of that 30-foot buffer.
Okay, so that's the motion. I'll second that motion. Discussion from the board members. Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Passes 5-0. And I believe that's the last case today. Is that right, John?
Yes, sir. We're finished.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.